today's ominous music because apparently, I don't know, because we have ominous stuff occurring in Guild Wars 2, the game, where we have releases of things and news about stuff, and it's exciting, and we're all hype and massively excited for today's podcast. Or apparently I am, very much so. I'm pretty sure everyone is. It's going to be fun. Welcome to the Lightbringers podcast, episode 41 of season 2. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of things, as long as I can bring up our cameras and you can see everyone's faces and you can also hear them at the same time, which is going to happen right now with the click of my finger. Boom! Say hello, everyone.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone.
So that actually worked.
Following it to a T.
That actually worked. That is like the first time I've been able to do that all in one at the same time.
Is it because we weren't interrupting you this time?
We? You mean you?
Actually, possibly. That possibly could be it. Because my brain, I'm focusing on many different things at the same time. We have our wonderful guests. I'm going to try and get through the intro very quickly because we're going to get into it. Because we've got a lot to get through. And we've probably got about 2.5 hours or so-ish to do it. So, Kroof, tell us what you do, where you do it. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Kroof. I do a lot of YouTube videos over at Kroof, and I also stream here on Twitch every once in a while. I'm working at a restaurant now, so scheduling might be a little different, but I'm excited.
That's cool.
But you're working on a restaurant?
Yeah. Working in like a...
Yeah, Kroof has started a restaurant. And
I was like, what? I was like, this is well good.
Doing like a little part-time gig,
Yeah. Good.
Keep myself busy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. What kind of a restaurant is it?
Chipotle.
Hey.
All right.
Chipotle?
Hey.
You know, burritos. It's in walking distance, so I was like, it was when my PC broke. I was like, well, I'm bored for a week. I don't know how long it's gonna be, so.
Gotta do it. Yeah.
So you got part-time job?
I'll go get a part-time job.
That's
at Chipotle,
amazing.
I guess.
Yeah.
It's part-time.
Hell yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Enjoy it. Good stuff. Please go follow Kroof. All this stuff is important.
You get free food if you work at Chipotle?
You get free food if you work in most places, dude.
Yeah, if you work a shift, then 50% discount.
Oh, well, that's not free.
Well, you get a free meal if you work a shift.
Okay.
So, I'm technically not wrong.
So work at Chipotle, then, everyone. Okay, cool.
I'm working their social media. Anyways.
Good. Fornax. That's what you do where you do it. Hello.
Hey, I'm Fornax. I'm a YouTuber. I make Guild Wars 2 videos. I've actually made 2 this week, so please go and look at my channel and look at them, talking about exactly the topics we're talking about here today. So maybe like after here? Anyway, yeah, that's what I do.
Excellent.
YouTube, Guild Wars 2, yeah.
Do it. Description, all the stuff in there. Check it out. Rookery. Hello. Tell us what you do.
Hello.
Where you do it.
Hi, I'm Rook, aka Rookery, and you can find me on Twitch here at ROOKURI. You can find me over on my YouTube at the same, and you can find me on Twitch at Rookery_. I love MMORPGs. I play a ton of Guild Wars 2 and Final Fantasy 14. I've been doing some recent streams, even kind of expanding how I engage with that. We've been taking a couple Guild Wars 2 players, creative partners through the story in Final Fantasy 14, which has been chaos. Absolute chaos. Angie and Paul are hilarious and ridiculous, and that's been a blast. I've also been doing some lore streams. And, you know, Fornax and I, maybe we can't say anything, but maybe keep an eye out for some Guild Wars 2 lore stuff coming up sometime soon as well. But I've been trying to this year really figure out how I can continue to engage with all the parts of the games that I love. So keep an eye out, because if I am not streaming it myself or doing something kind of interesting with lore, character, story, or just playing the games as well, just straight up, I'm probably going to be on podcasts like this one, or over on YouTube, or shoutcasting, or hosting events. So
Excellente. Thank you very much for joining us as well. Boots, tell us what you do, where you do it. Hello, welcome back.
Hi, I'm Boots. You can find my stuff at World Avengers on YouTube. I make builds a lot of the time, but I'm trying to do some adventures. I want to do an adventure thing, and it's been
adventurous.
It's been eye-opening about myself.
Oh yeah, how's that?
I'm learning a lot about myself. Oh, just because I think I have an addictive personality.
Okay. You just like them. You do like adventures though. There's nothing wrong. You can have an interest in something and that be an okay thing.
Do you fixate on things? Do you just like
do.
a thing? Yep, no. I mean,
Yep.
so does my partner.
Just like a raid boss.
A thing will grip you, and then it's just like, now my whole existence is this one thing. I kind of do the same though with role playing and writing. So
Yeah, I've done that with a PvP game this week as well. I was just like, I have to, any spare moment I get, I need to, yeah, I get it. Okay. Well, good luck with that, Boots. When it's on YouTube, let us know.
Okay.
Do it! Okay. I'm excited. So this week we had a studio update, Guild Wars 2 in 2023. It's been a while. We've been waiting for eons.
so long, like
long.
1 whole month and a half from
That's
the start
quite
of the
long.
year. We've been waiting, and it's been brutal.
It has been, but we are here now and we have it and it is here and we're going to read through it for you all as well, just in case you couldn't be asked to do it. We're going to do it for you. So, but we're also going to talk about it as well because there is so much to go through. Let me just make sure we got the right screen. Awesome. The intro. Do we need to do this? Maybe not. But just basically the first thing is just kind of them saying, hello, we won loads of awards, we're great, yeah, that's cool. And they closed in December and they said they were going to talk about the game in early 2023. That's the basic gist of like the first couple of paragraphs, and then they're kind of talking about the problem and all this stuff and the things.
It's still technically early 2023.
Yeah,
It is.
absolutely.
This is true.
That's very
I'd say
true.
until March, April, around there.
Q1,
Whenever the
yeah.
first quarter is done. Yeah.
3 months. That's
Yeah.
it. January, February, March. That's it. Boom. So that's where we are right now. And everyone in chat as well, if you're here live, welcome, welcome, welcome. I didn't do an intro for myself. I'm Jebro, the host of the channel show thing. And these are all co-hosts. They're the main co-hosts of the channel and of the show as well. So please go and check out all of this stuff. I would muchly appreciate it. And also it is anchor.fm/JebroUnity. I don't know why I didn't do Lightbringers. I think it's because the old ESO podcast is on there as well. So if you ever want to go listen to that, very welcome too. We will definitely be talking about ESO because at the moment Guild Wars 2 is going to a very much ESO focused direction in terms of their content releases, which is very, very interesting, but different. But there's some influence there, which is very, very interesting. So if you want to go and check out all that content, go and listen to the Lightbringers podcast as well as on youtube.com/JebroUnity
It's
as
interesting.
well.
The next release in Guild Wars 2, apparently the story is all about scrolls that are elder. It's weird.
Yeah,
Gosh.
Yeah.
that's very funny.
Yeah, so strange this direction they're taking, but sure, yeah.
So this
Did I miss that email?
You did. This was released on the 13th of Feb, which was earlier this week. We've got the first segment of it. There's it's fairly beefy. It's not massive, which is good. But yeah, if anyone wants to read the first bit, I'll kind of stop you after I feel like we can start talking about something. And yeah, if anyone wants to volunteer, we like to read. Okay, I like to get
So
other people
defining
to
the
read.
problem.
Sure, yeah.
Who's doing it?
Oh, I'm gonna do it.
Proof.
Because you do it.
I'm a
Take
I got
it.
already. Look, my
Smash
mic is
it.
so close to my mouth now.
Oh, we're doing ASMR.
Oh.
Okay, well,
Let's
we have
each
to...
do one word.
No,
Listen,
don't do that.
No, we don't have to do that.
Since
Look at
So
Rick's
defining
face.
the problem.
Since
No boots.
2021.
No boots. No.
The delay is not going to work. So it reads, since 2021, we've put a renewed emphasis on developing Guild Wars 2 with a player-centric approach, where step one in our development process is to seek out and understand the problems and frustrations that MMO players face. This approach was first adopted at ArenaNet over 20 years ago and is at the core of the continued success of the Guild Wars franchise. The conclusion of the Elder Dragon saga, a story told over the course of a decade, was an opportunity for our team to reflect on our past before moving forward. We evaluated what has and hasn't worked over the years and used those insights to redefine how we develop and release content for our players. Our goals for the next phase of Guild Wars 2 are simple. We want to deliver content updates in a more timely and consistent manner, and we want to provide better support for the wide variety of systems and game modes that make up the Guild Wars 2 experience. Having the development bandwidth needed to iterate on core systems is especially important to us, and it's something we've been making headway on over the last year with our quality of life improvement initiative. There are so many systems in Guild Wars 2 that have good bones, and they can be even better with just a bit of love.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to this first kind of paragraph here, when they talk about the development process and thinking about what they first adopted about 20 years ago. So if you think about Guild Wars and how they released content for that, what did they call they called them expansions, right? But they were they more frequent? I'm trying to remember. Do you think they're trying to go back to something? How many expansions did they have, and how often were they released?
They weren't expansions, were they? They were called
Guild Wars
Campaigns.
Yeah.
They're called campaigns.
Campaigns, that's right. So they actually called them something else because I think they wanted to, like they said, they wanted to do something different, right? Where they were maybe releasing these campaigns. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So
I guess in maybe the scale or the way that they're kind of labeling it shares a similarity, but I don't really think it is totally comparable to the Guild Wars 1's editions from my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong because I didn't play it when it was current, right? But the fact that these are meant to be, I assume, probably still part of a linear building narrative that revolves around the commander / champion as a figure, right? So that linear throughput, as opposed to like starting each campaign even possibly with like a totally different character or things like that, like you did in Guild Wars 1, seems pretty different to me, as well as the fact that it's not Guild Wars 1 campaigns. They weren't released episodically, were they? They were one whole thing. I'm pretty sure
they were a large chunk, but I believe there were like in between patches and like post updates like later on.
Sure,
like the
yeah,
wins. Wasn't there like they went back to Cantha or something for the purist stuff?
Oh,
one of the final updates.
Winds of Change.
They did like epilogue stuff almost, where you would get like a bonus quest journey thing after. Yeah, but the actual like Nightfall itself was released all as one thing, right? Prophecies was all one thing. Yeah. So it is interesting. It is interesting. I'm curious what they're going to do with it. But this, I think, first paragraph, talks specifically about something that we have talked about a ton of times, right? That there are so many good types of content in this game, and that for whatever reason, it's very difficult to seem to get a grasp on when we can expect releases for that content. And so I do think that's a big thing that we've talked about, you know? When do we get the next raid? How many months between fractals? When are we getting strike missions? Will we ever get like, you know, a new map or something for PvP? It's one of those things where I think Guild Wars 2 has definitely struggled with this exact problem, that what obviously they're going to do, it will theoretically shift them towards being able to manage better. But it is tough, especially when you compare to other games that have a much more fixed schedule. You know we get a new raid wing X amount of months. We know we get this, or this. Guild Wars 2 has always struggled a bit in those regards, even though they've been better about it with End of Dragons.
Yeah, so in this first section, it seems as though they're just outlining the things that they want to have for the game. And on paper, like all these things are, yes, this is exactly what we want. We want more timely, consistent content, and we want the systems of the game that, you know, world versus world, PvP, fractals, strikes. There's a lot of areas of the game that, well, raids they don't mention. There's a lot of areas of the game that that could use a little love and just like fine tuning and like updates, PvP and world versus world, that haven't historically gotten it, or we haven't had much communication on it for a long time. And they want to address that, and they want to go forward, giving us more information and giving us more updates for these things in a more consistent manner. And that's good. But the question is, how are they going to do it? And I guess that's the next section.
Isn't this also, I got some notes for this, and it was more of it was like I was thinking about Guild Wars 2 and how they released it, because they did want to do this at the beginning, which is what they're talking about going back, because they did release content very, very often in smaller chunks, but it just wasn't manageable. So do you think that this is them trying to redefine maybe that launch cadence maybe that they wanted to produce this content in a more timely manner where it wasn't expansions, because they were always like, we're not going to do expansions, but now they're talking about smaller expansions because I think expansions is just the language.
I think we should get to that section
next
first.
section,
Where they
yeah.
actually
yeah. This is
That I think directly addresses what would be the motivation behind shifting to this model.
kind of, yeah. I was kind of going for the whole 20 years ago, I guess, and like talking about like the launch of the game though. So it was like kind of the start of that. But yeah, okay, we can mix it
I will
in.
say I do like that they continue to point out the importance of their core systems. In the last paragraph, they said to iterate on core systems is especially important. I always like hearing that, just to see that these things are not being left behind, and that the entire game experience from Heart of Thorns to core game to now is still valuable and an important part of a player's gameplay experience. So
I would like to know what they
Yeah.
define as their core systems, though.
yeah, I think
I
it's
know.
something good. Like, is it like traits,
God.
weapons, skills, skins,
Is it dungeons?
customization?
Not dungeon. I mean,
No, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. It's like,
yeah.
what is the core systems that they're talking about?
that is definitely a big question, and I'm sure we'll have even more to think about that. I mean, Jeb, to go back to what you were saying, I think when they reference, at least the way that I interpreted, when they reference, returning to an approach that was adopted 20 years ago, right? I didn't get, and this was just how I read it, but I didn't get that they were talking specifically about like Guild Wars 1's models or the
no, it's
original
just
Living
questions.
Season model,
Yeah.
but more so, like they're saying here, a player-centric approach, right? We've put a renewed emphasis on this, on really figuring out what our community and our players want and what frustrations, like they say kind of before that, we might be facing. And so, they're saying that's kind of what they have always set out to do. And of course, they really want to get that commitment back and rolling, which means that they had to take a look at some of the problems that their team as well as the player base face with just how the studio is. And I mean, I agree. I'm very curious about how they identify the core systems, but I do think the rest of the article maybe gives us at least some indicator of content types. But again, it is, I would love to just have them actually sit down and broadcast live and be like, this is what we consider PvE. This is what we consider PvP. This is what, this is what we're going to be building or not building for the future. But we can't get that from them. It's impossible. We never get it ever.
Not yet. Maybe there's a window of opportunity for that.
I mean, if core systems is adventures, I mean that's.
Well, there's something coming up where I'm like, I think you'll like that, and I think they're talking about it in a roundabout way, but we'll see.
So the path
Can I ask you?
forward.
Oh,
Go ahead.
oh,
Yes,
can I-
Go ahead.
Cranhammer is
Sorry,
not
apologies.
talked at all.
Please.
can I ask you a question? So you mentioned the original campaigns, Prophecies, Factions, Nightfall, Eye of the North, and then the bonus stuff that they did, right? Did you play that, Jeb? I don't know.
Yes,
Did you tick
I
right?
forgot
Okay.
that I played it though, because I forget things very often. We
I-
unlocked it on the stream, and I was like, I've played this, and not only had I played it on stream. And I was like,
Damn. So
that's how long I've
here's
been
my-
streaming for. So it's
Holy
it's
shit
like
balls.
8 years, 8.5 years or so. So it's like it's been a long time. And also, I'm old now. I'm older now. I've got less hair. The less hair you have, the less memories you carry through life.
apparently, my question. So I did play the original campaigns
Sorry.
myself.
Yeah.
So you get old, you get dead, babe. That's the only two choices you've got. So the question is,
Thank you.
so you played them.
Yeah.
You understand the kind of the structure is. So each of the original campaigns is a standalone game. So you can play through it and you can make new characters in each of the campaigns, but there's crossover, so you can travel to the different campaign to experience the storyline.
Yeah.
Is that something that you want them to go back to personally? This is not like predictions or anything
interesting.
like that.
I
Do you
mean,
like that?
I'm not sure. So when I asked that, all I do is ask questions to incite conversation. I don't necessarily believe everything I say. But like, I mean, that brings up an interesting question for later, I think, with the expansions releasing and the fact that if you have the expansion, you have the story, you can unlock the story for free. You don't have to log in, which is, we'll bring that back later, because I actually think that's a very good point for later. So do you mind if we table it for now?
No.
Is that all right?
Absolutely
But can you
not,
just remember to bring it back, because it's a really, really good point. Because I actually...
I'll try.
I'm not sure how I feel about that, but also I kind of like it because the whole logging in thing is kind of annoying, and like just unlocking Living World is just a pain in the ass anyway, and it's just bad. Like they just need to change that.
Agreed.
So like it just is. Sorry.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to all collaboratively remember to touch on this later.
It is important. It is.
Chat, that goes for you too.
That is actually, thank you. Please. The reason I'm telling everyone is because I will forget. And it's not a disrespect thing, it's just my brain. It was actually, wait, someone commented on the chat and then we can pin it. That's true. Probably a good idea. Okay. That's actually, I'm going to start doing that a lot more. Okay, yeah, that's a really good point though. Thank you for bringing that up, Harold. Do you have any comments on that first kind of bit, Onyx, or
About them, I think it shows a great deal of like maturity and humility to be able to consciously look at what's going right and what's going wrong. Because I mean, it's easy if you think about it on a personal level, it's easy to bullshit yourself. It's easy to pretend that you're doing better, and exactly, and like paper over the cracks and just try and like push forward. And in a corporate environment, it's the game of telephone. So by the time the troubles get to the top person who's making the decisions, everything's fine. When it was, the room was on fire in the place where people were having the conversation on the ground. And I think it takes a huge amount of humility and maturity for a company to take a steady and honest look at themselves. And I think that there are some things that they've done fantastically, and I think there are some things that they have not done and abandoned things and not explained their thought process and kind of excluded the community and not brought us along with them. And the fact that they're kind of owning up to their shortcomings is great. Nothing but love and respect for me for that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we definitely see information given to us in different places that we might not all have access to as well. Anyway, we can move on swiftly. Thank you for that. Very good point. Boots, did you say, I think you were starting to read it and you thought about it. Do you want to read it?
That was about 20 minutes ago, though.
Okay, you can still do it if you want.
Okay, all right. The path forward.
Oh, God.
Let's get into it.
First step towards accomplishing these goals was to rebalance how we allocate development resources across the project. Historically, with few exceptions, Living World seasons have required the focus of nearly the entire Guild Wars 2 development team to deliver them at the size, quality, cadence that our players expect. This made it difficult to simultaneously develop expansions while supporting the game with regular content updates. It also meant that many areas of the game went under-supported. In the next phase of Guild Wars 2 development, we're taking a more balanced approach that will allow us to provide more support for popular game modes. This one's interesting. Make frequent quality of life improvements to core gameplay systems like professions. ... Anyway.
Just letting us know that
Pause for impact.
Grant Harold's reaction there was, Phonix's reaction was the best. You need to do it again, though, for more impact, I think.
Make frequent quality of life improvements to core gameplay systems like professions. Deliver new features and expand the world of Tyria with satisfying immersive story updates.
Okay.
Now, is that fancy language for balance patches?
I hope it is not just fancy language for balance patches, because I don't know,
Weird.
man.
I found this to be just kind of like re-emphasizing just what they've said many times over as well. I think and just kind of like maybe just being like, in between things, we're going to do this more, and also it's going to be with expansions more, because End of Dragons did bring out, there was some quality of life stuff that came out, and they did do that in recent years, so they've kind of ramped up on it. So I think like they want to be more broad right? They just want to be more broad across, like, rather than
It's
just Living World story.
Well,
I mean, it's probably just balance patches. You're right, Kroof. Unfortunately, it's probably just.
Hey man,
Which is really.
I was just
No.
trying to go with the positive vibe for once.
No, we don't know
For
though,
me.
because here's the thing. One of the big questions, and we're going to get to this, right, is as we shift to a new model, what does that mean for things like new elite specializations? What does that mean for all of these other things that we normally expect with a, full-on expansion drop? So this could mean that things shift or are bigger than just balance patches. Of course, balance has been really important, but we've even seen, and we've talked about on the podcast recently, that there are a lot of classes that needed updates, that needed some things to be addressed, that maybe have had parts or functions of their class that through either changes that have happened or through initial design philosophies that now don't have as much relevance, just needed something. So I get the impression that whether or not, and we can add a pin to the pin from earlier, whether or not this, we need 50 pins.
I've only got
whether
one.
Or not,
You're gonna
We'll
have to
have to address-
just copy paste your message, Rook, and we'll just add to it.
okay, great. If this means that, we aren't going to be getting new elite specs every year, every 2 year, every whatever it is, right? This could mean that what we get in regards to other changes is bigger. That's just what I'm thinking,
I mean, I feel like, if I remember correctly, the last times we had elite specializations, they had like a team of 2 or 3 people working on it for each expansion.
It was about 5.
It was 5? Okay.
Yeah, there was at least 3 people who presented. No, 4 on Chronomancer. Not Chronomancer. Yeah, Chronomancer. There was about 4 or 5. As far as I remember, because they had different presenters on. There was Iranio, who's actually, funny enough, at Elder Scrolls Online now. There was Carl McLean. Another guy who's left. And there was 2 more people. I can't remember the names though. But they had a weird team though, because I think those teams crossed over in PvP as well in different times.
It depends on the expansion, how many people are on the teams, but I want to say the most recent expansion, it was 3 people.
I don't know about the recent one. Could be.
So I don't know how big of an impact removing elite specializations from future updates will have on the studio as a whole.
Are you assuming that that's going to be the case?
Yeah.
Well, Rook was saying that it's possible that not having elite specializations in the future expansions would mean that they get to put that effort into other things, new quality of life features, new things that aren't. This is true, but I just don't know how big of an impact that would be.
Well, I mean, is that coming? Maybe we can. That's kind of coming up as well.
So we're gonna table this as well, but we're gonna have to talk about elite specializations because it's not mentioned at all in this post.
Oh, there's a features part though. I was going to bring it up.
Yeah.
Then.
I did want to touch on
can.
something else with this section though, the path forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because while we kind of mentioned that this is stuff that we've heard them talk about, I actually thought personally, as far as I can remember, this is one of the absolute clearest times I have ever heard them communicate how they divide their labor in working on something like an expansion. Because we have always had our guesses, right?
Yeah.
I think I've said a million times on this podcast, like Iceberg Saga, you can tell towards the end that they were really having some problems, and that like in the sense that the beginning was such a strong start, but towards the end, obviously those episodes got much weaker. And I have always thought in my head and in my heart that had to be because of the development of End of Dragons, right?
I think it was though, and I think that's the few exceptions situation in there.
And that's what I think is so interesting here, because we have seen what this team can deliver when they are focusing all of their attention and efforts on something. The start of Iceberg Saga, that first prologue portion, all the other, there's so many good things in Iceberg Saga, even if it was wibbly, right? And then we have also conversely seen what happens when the studio divides its labor like this. End of Dragons was phenomenal, but did that mean that the consistency of content and releases and other things that we had very much seemed to drop off leading right up to the expansion? Yes. So
But
go ahead.
But I don't know if that's there's something else to that too, because back it's season 3, season 4. Season 3, season 4, I feel were very high quality Living World releases. And if I remember correctly, there was a studio announcement, like a blog post about what they were doing after Heart of Thorns, I think it was. And they basically said that, look, we're going to have 120 people working on the next expansion, and then a smaller group of people working on the Living World updates in 4 groups or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Or three groups doing alternating things.
Yeah.
So they divided their force up.
Yeah, they've told us.
According to them,
Well, but
according
this
to them
is the
back
thing.
then, they divided them up.
I think that was their intention, but I would be so curious to hear if that's what actually
Oh no,
happened.
it is what that happened.
Exactly.
It is what happened. 100%. 100%.
Well, but
yeah.
here's the thing, though. We had such a huge amount of time between Path of Fire and this expansion. I cannot imagine, especially with all the other discussion about, like, was Iceberg Saga supposed to be the turning point where we switched to episodic expansions? Were these other things? Is that why they called it a saga? I always thought that an expansion was coming. But given the fact that we had essentially 3 living seasons and a huge gap between these expansions, I can't imagine that right after post Heart of Thorns, they saw that huge shift like they actually said they were going to, where the vast majority of their people were working on the new expansion, and then the rest were working on living seasons. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but if that was the case, I would have thought we would have gotten an expansion much sooner.
Heart of Thorns was weird because there was like 9 months of a drought, and then it led into season 3. However, with season 3, it transitioned so beautifully into Path of Fire with only like a month and a half of wait time for that expansion. So that line
And then
of
after
historically,
Path of Fire,
it went very
Path of Fire
quickly
was only
into
1
the
month
season.
until the season 4. Yeah.
So that line is actually kind of interesting. I don't know what they are specifically talking about, because they said like it requires the entire team to work on Living World, which if the entire team was working on Living World and then they had to jump to an expansion, I would have imagined there were larger time gaps in between. But it's also like, I think this literally is just highlighting the inconsistency of Guild Wars 2. This entire conversation we're having is like, we just don't know what the hell has been happening.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's been like gaps and then not gaps and then easy transitions and then moments of dead silence. And then of course we had some projects be canceled within the interim of season 4 in Iceberg Saga, which afterwards was them like getting their footing, and I think they did it very well. But yeah, I think this is really highlighting just like, yeah, we know that there was a lot of messed up timelines going on and scheduling, and we hope to really fix that.
They were pretty adamant. I remember talking to devs as well, and they had these teams existed. They were things that existed 100%. Like they just didn't work as well as they thought they did. I think that is probably what, because there were official posts. I remember this pretty well because I remember talking about it. But like, I don't think. I think Rook, you're right about the chat. I think with Iceberg Saga as well, I think we assumed there wasn't going to be an expansion because they talked about it as like a saga, or it was their kind of wording for what an expansion was, and we just didn't know at the time.
So yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that later. Pin the Iceberg Saga
pin
versus.
everything. Like,
Well, I mean, I
It is
remember because
weird.
when Jeb and I went to that event, right?
Oh, God.
we did the interview and stuff afterwards where I was talking with you and Roy, and you and Roy were convinced that this meant that there was no expansion coming because they didn't say anything either way. And I was convinced on the opposite side. I sat down and in that video, like in the footage that we had after we came back from the event, my friend that was with me that was recording stuff, I was like, we have an expansion coming. It's coming after this. Now, I don't know why, but like there's no way they're not going to do expansions. So like, again, the takeaway wasn't necessarily for me to like debate whether or not Iceberg Saga or stuff like that was meant to be this or that, or this model or things like this, right? But more so to say that I think we can very visibly see in the game when the amount of the team that Guild Wars 2 has is focused primarily on releasing something, the quality is fantastic, and it is oftentimes what we remember as being like, these were some of the best seasons, best moments, best episodes, right? And whatever the reasons are, because I think this is the big thing too, right? You could just say, well, then hire more people and make 2 separate teams, but it truly genuinely seems like that's not an option. Now, for why ever that is, I don't know. It could be the revenue, it could be the way that Guild Wars 2 runs the game, it could be NCSoft, it could be anything. But it seems as though ArenaNet and Guild Wars 2, even with its success, even with the influx of players, even with all these things, is not capable of essentially doubling the size of their staff and maintaining that. And that doesn't mean that that's bad. I mean, like, you don't have to have a massive staff, but it does mean that I think we see that this
It's not
could
the
be a
size
better
of the
quality.
staff that matters.
Yeah.
It's the
Sorry,
spells you
go
use
ahead.
to cast with it.
Go ahead, Boots.
Wow.
I've been on a roll, but I know you want to say some things.
No. I mean, the things I wanted to say was the stuff you started talking about. Now I kind of forget all the things that you were talking about at the beginning. So we've gone to a different point, I think. You're talking
transcended.
about whether or not we are going to get an expansion because of Icebrood Saga, whether it's going to be no expansion afterwards, or they're going to roll with Icebrood Saga and sagas in general. This is
Can you
something
say
that was
saga, by the way, please? Because I need to reaffirm
Saga.
this.
Sorry, Saga.
Saga. What's Saga?
Saga.
Yeah,
Saga.
Icebrood Saga.
Is it a
Icebrood Saga.
Canadian? Is that a Canadian way of saying saga, or is
No,
it
that's
just your ways?
Sege.
What'd you call me?
A segue? Those things you ride with 2
Canadian,
wheels.
you say Sege.
Sega, like Sega. No.
Sega, eh? Yeah. No, so Icebrood Saga is an interesting specimen, right?
Sorry.
And it is something that we should bring up when talking about what's happening in the future of this game, because
Are you sure you want to talk about it? No. Sometimes I'd rather forget.
no, we got to talk about
I'm
it. We got to
joking.
talk about it because it's very important at this point.
Oh no,
because,
I agree. Yeah.
So back when Icebrood Saga was announced, and people were predicting what's going to happen with the game because of it, there was 2 camps. One was Icebrood Saga is what it's going to be for the rest of the time, and the second camp was the game's not going to survive that way. We need expansions. And I think the way I understand it, based on conjecture and everything we got from the studio,
Yeah.
at the time it was a new director trying to make something work with Icebrood Saga. And
That was Mike Zero.
yeah, and for whatever reason, I mean, so they were making these Living World, but it's not Living World, it's Saga's releases, and they were promising that it was going to be bigger and more important than Living World because they're going to get you're going to get features with it, you're going to get all these new cool things,
Expansion-like features.
features.
This
Exactly.
is why people felt like it was instead of an expansion. The way
Now-
they worded things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the intention was that is exactly what it was. It was going to be
so.
in lieu of, in fact, if expansions, if it works. But I think the support of that idea fell away somewhere in between it being started and it ending.
Is that a language
And-
thing, or do you think that's a release thing, like how they went forward with it? Because that's a good point.
I think it was a internal discussion about the success of how they're going forward with it, and a decision being made that they need to switch back to expansions because it wasn't working as well as they hoped it would.
Money
And
thing. A
could've-
money thing,
yeah,
to be
money
clear.
thing.
Yeah.
Could
To be
have
clear, it's a
easily
money thing.
been an expansion, though, if you think about it, like its own
Yeah.
story. It could have easily been an expansion. Like,
Yeah.
in
It would have
itself.
required quite a large drought period
Yeah,
in between
absolutely.
season
Sure,
4 into
agree.
Icebrood Saga. So
to
that
package it all as an expansion.
yeah,
Do you think that's
it
why
might
they
have
didn't then?
hemorrhaged.
But
It might
it's-
have hemorrhaged a bit more. They probably got more out of it by just releasing it as a living world
Yeah.
rather than having that waiting period. But you didn't get that initial bump
Yeah.
in
Right, sales.
income and
Yeah,
in sales.
That's so true.
So the
doing
reason
it.
why this is important, though,
Interesting.
is because Going forward, we may be having a similar idea as what's happening here is it's going to be similar to what Icebrood Saga was supposed to be.
Agreed.
Before the direction and the funding and the everybody working towards the same thing got pulled from it. Except you're paying also for these.
Do you think they heard us
you're paying for
maybe
these
about
eggs.
that? Maybe they heard us about that. About,
Which
like,
we'll get
we
to in the
pay.
next section.
Well, which we'll get to the next
Oh,
section.
God damn it.
But the reason why all this is a little strange, though, and a little interesting is I think one of the reasons, well, not one of the reasons why the Icebrood Saga didn't work, but expansion-like features in Icebrood Saga, it's difficult to sell it to the player base as you're getting expansion-like features and make them pay for those things if you got expansion-like features in a free Living World Season 4, like you did with Skyscale and
the mounts, yeah. Well, actually, funny enough, with Icebrood Saga, there was brand new content that came in. There was strikes, which is interesting. So your point, that even makes your point more relevant.
Yeah, strikes are a thing. Strikes are. I don't know if that's expansion-like content though, because
I mean raids were right. So it's like that.
Right, but it was already a
person
thing in
kind
the
of
game, right? So like.
Yes, I wouldn't count strikes as expansion level content. It feels more like consistent.
I don't know. It's hard to say.
It
think
would
it's a new
if they
feature,
had
though.
packaged it. If they had packaged it, I would count it as expansion content. Because here's the thing. If you're pitching a new expansion, you have the trailer, you have the dev talk, you have the event at a convention or whatever, and you're like, what's coming with the new expansion? And then it's like, we're introducing a whole new type of battle, a whole new type of PvE content for you as players to engage in and enjoy. These will be more frequent than raids and blah, 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 blah.
I like
and
that
what
voice,
this
by the way.
is the strike mission. And then it like cuts over to, showing this new entire type and subtype of PvE content coming to the game, then yes, I do think it's expansion level. But I think because it felt I don't like saying this, because I actually do think that strikes are totally something that needed to be put in this game. I think they are great. I think that they are a piece of additional content. But I think the big problem here that has always been a big problem is the fact that they do not always feel like an addition to this game. They feel like a replacement to something else in this game. And because of that, it is really tough to look at them as like, this is a really cool new thing we had added to the game, when in the back of your mind, you're constantly thinking, instead of raids, instead of fractals, instead of... And I think that's been a big stumbling block. Now, of course, in this actual post, we get a bit more information, at least about what I think they are defining as some of their PvE content foundation, which does include fractals, which was such a relief.
Yeah.
Shall we mosey on to the next part?
Maybe we should mosey on, because now we actually have to read the packages.
I want to hear from
Can
Cry and
I-
Herald, because we don't hear enough from Phonics.
Sorry, I was just enjoying the
Scream it
No,
up,
no,
Fornax.
no. I want to include you more in this. Can you go?
So, I mean, first of all, I think that if the community thinks that these new raids are going to be like the Icebrood Saga, I wouldn't want to be reading the forums for a while. I don't think that that's going to go down too well, because it is as innovative and good as it started. I don't think that anyone here could claim that that was a critical success for the game, to be honest.
The saga.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been seeing that in my
think
comment section as well, as people have been mentioning that, oh, this is just the saga, and this is just a repeat of the saga. And I hold off from passing that judgment, because this feels like they are putting more money behind it, and we are also going to have to be paying less. They're dropping the price, so there will be funding for it. So I'm, as a player, expecting more from these products.
In my mind, it feels like it's trying to do what the Icebrood Saga was supposed to be doing again, but with the full force of the studio's direction and vision behind it, rather than just as an experiment.
My hope is that what they're going to do is they're going to, so they always seem to have about 30 irons in the fire as far as I could see. They've got all these different ideas and they're spinning up all these plates, and they're like a acrobat of some description. They've just got everything up in the air, so many balls up in the air. And what I'm hoping
I like the spinning plates one the best.
Thank you, but I like balls, so we're going with balls.
Okay.
So
many
You
balls.
go for the round sphere rather than the flat. Okay.
Okay. So what I'm hoping is that they cull some balls, so that they cull down some of the content that has not succeeded, that players aren't engaging with, that is just it's just not working for them. Vicious. Some castration is going to be happening. And they focus their resources on content just a more focused, less scope, more focused content with the team, so that they can actually deliver rather than having all these kind of conceptual things going on.
But is that what they're saying in the studio update? I don't think that's what they're saying at all. I think what they're saying is, rather than split between expansions and living world, they're going to put everything into expansion living world. And then, but they're also going to try to concentrate on all these other little quality of life things and all these other, like PvP, world versus world, all these other core systems that they've neglected for all these years, and try to work on them and make them better as well. So I don't think they are reducing scope. I think they're
They are, in a
I got
sense.
the impression they
know.
are as well, because they have so many types of content, but they have their pillars. They have PvE, PvP, and world versus world, and they really seem to hone in on, for PvE, strike missions and fractals. What I got from that is that they're not going to be trying to invent something like DRMs, Dragon Response Missions. They're not going to try to invent another form of strike mission and label it something else. I got the impression
That's
that they're just going to be like, we are sticking with these categories of content, and we're going to just be pushing into that.
so
Yeah,
no new
within
game
the-
modes for PvP.
No,
I think there is room for more game modes for PvP. They really haven't touched anything on PvP.
yes,
gonna
and they need
honesty,
to,
so.
and that needs to be addressed. Like,
They're just not gonna
to
do it.
me, what I get from this is that think about it. I mean, okay, this is just me doing an abstraction. So this is not like
Abstraction. Like it. Let's
it's
go.
not based in any actual information or anything that I
damn
know.
it.
This is just me kind of imagining. So if we can imagine that, like, okay, let's say that we have a release like a new fractal, right? So that would involve the team that needs to do that, the encounters team and the environments and all that kind of stuff. So we've got just 10 people. I'm just going to say, I know that doesn't matter what historically this is, but in my head, 10 people that they know need to be there to make that fractal happen. But with the past model, because that meant that 3 of those people were having to work on Living Season, and 7 of those people were having to work on the new expansion, or however this works, 5 or 5 or whatever, right? That oftentimes meant that they were having to go, well, we don't have the 10, so we can't do the fractal. So instead, we're going to come up with something like, what can you 3 do? Oh, like a DRM? Okay, so we'll do like a DRM, and then we won't have to worry about other stuff and like challenge mode things. And then the rest of you, what are you working on? Strikes for the new expansion? Cool. Then you're going to work on strikes for the new expansion, and those are going to be killer. But in the meantime, it meant that we got nothing but the weird DRM thing, or like whatever thing it would be, right? And kind of like chat has said, which I wanted to bring up, I don't think DRMs were a bad idea narratively, conceptually, but again, like you were all saying, when we start getting into these weird little subdivisions, splitting hairs of types of content that don't really fit with other types of content that aren't really the experience you want, or aren't as gratifying as they could be in some kind of way, and that repeatable or mechanics wise are just like not so fun, and have obviously been distilled down to like this very simple thing, which maybe that those 3 people could deal with. It just means that we had this issue. So in my mind, this shift now means that they will have 10 people. So if they say with episode 1, we release a fractal, they have those people to do the fractal. And then with episode 2 or 3 or whatever else they're going to do within this, I'm imagining that what they're trying to angle for, which we'll talk about more when we actually get to like the ESO style of content, right, is that they will have a more predictable cadence of how they can manipulate that team of 10 or whatever it is to do. We get a fractal at the start of the year and a fractal at the end of the year. We get, a strike mission with every release. We get that kind of thing. I think that makes sense.
That's we should probably read on because that's exactly what they say going on.
Yes. And so the next section says what it means for you.
Oh, should I read?
Would you like to read? Yeah,
I'll read. Why not? What it means for you. Our future expansions for Guild Wars 2 will be the backbone of this new approach. Rather than launching an expansion every 2 to 4 years with a season of Living World in between, we'll be releasing smaller expansions more frequently at a slightly reduced price and adding additional content for those expansions through quarterly updates, meaning that the next big release is only ever a few months away. The first release in an expansion cycle is the launch point for a new story arc, bringing with it 2 new open world maps, 2 strike missions, new gameplay and combat features, new masteries, and new rewards. In the following quarterly updates, we'll add another open world map, additional story chapters, challenge modes for the strike missions, a new fractal dungeon and challenge mode, new rewards, and additions to the new systems introduced in that expansion. Once that expansion story is complete, the next expansion will be just around the corner.
Okay.
So, yeah. Interestingly in this, they say in quarterly updates afterwards, we'll be getting this other stuff. But they don't mention, you could just suppose that means that the story will wind down in 3, maybe 4 quarterly updates afterwards. Because it does technically have to wind down before the 2 to 4 years between expansions, right? Because if they are mini expansions, the time frame between them should be shorter than the major expansions, right?
I mean, that's what they're saying, I guess.
Yeah. So are we expecting every year a new mini expansion or every 2 years?
Every year.
They're saying quarters. So this is okay.
They say quarterly, yeah, but they don't say there will be 3 quarterly updates afterwards. They say nothing about that.
I think when you talk quarterly, I think the assumption is that maybe that it could be yearly. That's where I kind of get it. I guess.
Well, that's not what they're saying.
Yeah, but as per usual, the assumption we rely. That's where we get our information from because they don't communicate these things. So if they're vague, and I don't want to sound negative, it's the truth.
A year and a half or 2 years is still faster than 2 to 4 years.
Yeah.
So it could be 6 quarterly updates after.
That's one way of covering themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would expect from what they've said to get a new expansion at the earliest a year, but I'd feel more comfortable with a year and a half for them to develop and actually have more of a payoff for that expansion while also giving themselves
storyline you're saying,
and the storyline and all of the narrative plot points that they need to wrap up, but also to give them more time to develop that expansion so that it is a worthwhile purchase from a player standpoint. Because if they just rush an expansion for 1 year where it has to kind of be really, really fast, I just wonder the community's reaction, what it would be if there wasn't a nice bite to it in terms of the longevity of the story, the events and all that stuff.
They don't mention price point.
This is the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what Rick was talking about earlier, and I was talking about. Elder Scrolls Online does it in a year. Bang.
Yeah.
They give you a chapter worth of expansions content in the summer, which is when they release it, and they give you dungeon DLC and they give you story DLC. It is less than this, but I think they fit a lot of it into the chapter. So they put a new trial in, which is a raid, and they might bring in new story stuff as well, during that. They have
What's
a
the price
pre-look
point for ESO.
What's the what? Sorry.
Well, how much is it for an ESO expansion like that?
I think it's 35, and then it depends how much it is for extra.
Rook's I've been paying $60.
Well,
yeah, so
okay. I think to be
depends
fair,
what you include in it.
Yeah,
DLCs
I think
and
I
ESO
normally
Plus.
get the collectors because the collector's editions come with a bunch of cosmetic stuff and a mount and things like that, and then that is more on par with the $60.
Yeah, because otherwise it's
how do you
35.
feel about the amount of stuff you get for $40 to $60 for that year?
I personally feel good about it the one big thing, okay, I mean, oh my gosh, there's so many things to talk about with this entire topic. It's hard to even just
This is the
distill to
thing.
the one moment.
Yeah.
I feel good about what I get from ESO with that, right? Like when they release their first segment of story, and Jeb can absolutely also, talk about this because Jeb is a partner with them, but when they release that first segment of story, so part 1 that drops for the expansion, it is in and of itself its own condensed entire narrative arc. Like you go through the whole thing and it sets up stuff for whatever part 2 is going to be, but you usually have some kind of culmination where you learn about all the stuff and introduce all these side characters and all these things. You do this big journey and you go through in this new content, and then you get to the end of it, and they almost always now have some kind of feeling of, here's, sort of the end of this current part of the narrative, where you get to talk to the characters that you met along the way. And if you've done a lot of stuff, around the maps, more of those characters even show up and are there, and you can like talk with them and have that little moment. And you've got like a big confrontation. And then it kind of wraps up in such a way that you do feel like you got a good hunk of story. And that's just part 1. And then with the other stuff that you get, that gives you additional things to do. And then part 2 has its own, culmination of the greater overarching arc. But it doesn't feel like Living Seasons where you just get to watch like a 20-minute episode. Well, okay, that's not fair, because Living Seasons can range wildly in the amount of time and everything and the amount of impact that you get from story. But what I mean more so is that it feels more like a movie versus a television episode, if that makes sense. You're watching movie part 1, movie part 2, as opposed to.
So if you could compare it to, okay, let's first compare it to End of Dragons, let's say. Would you say that it would be about the first half of End of Dragons you would get for that first
For ESO
purchase?
No.
Yeah.
No. It's really like, think of it like an expansion. I think ESO, you get 2 dungeons in the first quarter. The second quarter, you get a chapter, which is basically a map, but it's an overarching story. So it's like an extra map with story, but this map is bigger. It might have another level, which is added later in a third patch, for example, which is the story patch.
Okay.
Is it worth it?
If I'm comparing it to Guild Wars 2 as it was,
yeah.
Am I talking about, is it End of Dragons level? Is it half of End of Dragons level? Is it?
I think it's probably
2
like
episodes of Living
a
World?
quarter of End of Dragons.
A quarter?
Wow.
Don't forget they have 2 other, like, they might release a class, for example. So Warden, other classes.
And then for the same, and then not having to pay any more, you would get the second half of that. So it would be a half of End of Dragons.
You actually
in 1
have
year.
to pay, depending on if you have ESO Plus, which is the monthly subscription, you can get the DLC for free, which is not technically free because you're paying a monthly subscription. Or you pay like, what, $25, I think? $20, something like that. But that's that's how they earn their
bag.
money. Well, that's how
They're
they get
getting
their
money.
money, They charge for
I
their
think
game.
it's hard. It's hard to compare because, okay,
You get so much from Guild Wars 2.
Is it $15? Okay.
you do get so much from Guild Wars 2, but what I mean is you can tell a story that feels like it has the meat, weight, and impact of something like an expansion in 3 hours.
Sure.
Like if you look at the game Journey, right? Like Journey takes you 2 hours or something, and yet its story and narrative and arc feel as robust to me as playing God of War Ragnarok. So it's hard to compare in that sense, because when Jebro says it's like a quarter of End of Dragons, I think that's more taking into
The
account
literal content. Yeah.
Yes, like
That's
you know,
it.
because if we're at like halfway through End of Dragons, that means that at that point you've gotten multiple maps, you've gotten Jade Bot, you've gotten all this other stuff, right? But
I'm thinking specifically story content.
yes, but if you're thinking story, which
It's probably
is
about
what I
the
mean,
same.
then yes, but also it still feels like an expansion.
Oh yeah.
So even just the first half, you get so much from it. Like that very first installment of whatever the expansion is that comes out for ESO. You feel by the end like you have played essentially an expansion, maybe just with less of the map feature, additional content feature, additional stuff like that. But the actual narrative arc is fully robust in the way that like Journey is fully robust. You know, it's not as though they leave you on some really awkward cliffhanger, or like you've just met 2 new characters and then that's it. Like you take entire condensed journeys with all of those characters. There's all sorts of supplemental storytelling that you get on the map.
Side quests, yeah, there's a lot.
Side quests. There's like different regions on the maps as well that if you go to them, they have like unique icons, and there are entire side story arcs within that if you then complete those, play into the overall expansion. So like I was saying, if you go around the map and I go to these old ruins and then I find out what's happening at the old ruins, I might pick up a major NPC that I encounter there, who then, if I did that and I cleared it and I did all those quests, shows up for me in the finale of the culmination of that first part of the expansion. So like...
Oh, so I guess a question that I have is, if Guild Wars 2 is moving to a model that's more similar to ESO, do you think that Guild Wars 2 will have to start changing, will have to change the way they deliver and tell their story a little bit in order to make it work more fulfillingly?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
I would imagine they're happy to. Because having to do 10 years of the same story while peppering in.
Well, I'm not talking about
and,
the story, the content of the story. I'm talking about the way they deliver the story.
You mean like through just instances, or like the introduction of side quests?
The way the living world has worked the entire time, and how the way expansion storytelling has worked the entire time.
Or if they're not calling it living world anymore, then you would assume that they would do something different there. But I mean, that's different systems and different... I mean, I guess it can all change. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you're talking about the... Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Well, they have been entertaining more classic quest ideas, and I think that they could get a lot of use out of that, because it's no longer like instance-based. It's like you set up an NPC, you have the dialogue, you have the reward, and you organically get the story by doing it. You also get story through meta events as well. So... maybe they will have more classic quest type story moments. I would like to see it, while also having those instance-based fights, and then potentially a cinematic or two. But I
would
don't
love
know.
that. Honestly.
I feel like they have a few methods of storytelling already, and of course like books.
Books.
Which are like small achievement, like side lore story if you really want it, but
yeah.
I don't think that would be like a main system. It's like they have a lot of tools at their disposal to elaborate and tell the story that they want to tell. So, like, do you think they could introduce something else that they don't currently have? Or like...
Are you asking me?
Yeah, like, or if they would focus on something more...
Well, I'm trying to understand, because the way the feeling I'm getting from the ESO content from you guys versus Guild Wars 2 content is that even though the amount of playable, like, you know, there might be only one map, there might be only this much actual combat stuff, even though the gameplay content might be smaller than what you get for Guild Wars 2 in many instances.
It's smaller and a lot easier.
The story feels more complete quicker. And I'm wondering if we have to do mini expansions going forward with less content overall, will they have to figure out a way to get the story to feel more complete quicker than they'd have in the past?
I think it will take some restructuring of their narrative beats, because and this is what is tough, because I like the ESO expansions. I do think they're fun. I enjoy them. I feel like if I go in and tackle even what was first released, I do have a satisfying journey, and I can power through it one weekend and then be like, oh, that was actually really good. That was a really good story here in this world. And I think that's a great success. But of course, like you're saying, Boots, that did mean that I think to have that satisfying feeling and distinguish it from just being like, this is patch content like you get in so many other MMOs, or living season, or whatever it is, right? To distinguish it as something that is an expansion in its own right does mean that you have to change the scale, scope, and narrative structuring of what you're doing, so that players feel like whenever they're engaging with this expansion, that they got impact from it and they got something, worthwhile that they could really dig into, as opposed to just being strung along bit by bit by bit. Because at that point, why are you even, you're not even necessarily doing expansions, you're just doing patch content, right? So, and I think from what we see here in their notes, right, that they're saying the first release will have new story arc, 2 open world maps, 2 strike missions, new gameplay combat, new masteries, new rewards. That already sounds even more robust than what we initially get with ESO. Okay. So I do think that they are looking at that impact, right? But here's the big draw of the downside of this. I will say this much about how that pacing affects overall is that my partner actually said this, and I thought this was so brilliant that I wanted to share it here today. I already talked about it on my own stream, but can you all think about the recent expansions that have come out for major MMOs? Can you name them?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which ones? Except
Dragonflight, Endwalker.
Yeah, Endwalker,
End of
Dragonflight.
Dragons.
Cool. Can you all tell me, minus Jebro, who plays actively, can you all tell me the names of the recent Elder Scrolls expansions?
High Island.
That's close enough. That's close enough.
That's actually pretty close.
You underestimate.
It's Isle. It's called Island.
I'm surprised by this. Can Boots or Fornax, can you name any of the Elder Scrolls expansions?
Do I have to have paid any attention to Elder Scrolls?
No. You can probably do it. You can probably just guess at this point.
What's that place called? Morrowind.
Yeah, that's one.
That was one. Correct.
Yes.
Correct. But we can tell you were fishing for it.
That's why I gave you the hint there. That's the thing.
So this is the huge hurdle, right? When you have an expansion that drops in one go, like we've said about revenue, it's not just revenue, it's public attention, it is notoriety in the MMO community, it's advertising campaigns, it is, I avidly play Elder Scrolls Online and I enjoy it. Jebro does too, and we enjoy it. But as I go throughout the year, there are times where I literally go, play this one? Okay, but I did part 1. Did I finish part 1 of it? No, I didn't. But I was gonna go in. Is part 2 out yet? When was that supposed to come out?
Oh yeah, their systems are not good. There's some bad systems going on.
Well, what I mean is that I like the way that they do those, but the biggest hurdle that I think is going to be facing Guild Wars 2 is impact. How do you hype and sell this in such a way to your community that it doesn't just cause things to downslide to where people they don't have those markers of a huge expansion is coming out. It's drawing in tons of people. It's bringing people back to the game. And as we have seen recently, even in ESO, there has been a downslide in the player base and many people, for many reasons, having feelings about types of features and content balance and things like that and pacing that has maybe caused a lack of momentum. I think this new shift could work great for Guild Wars 2. I genuinely do, and I honestly think it's probably the smartest decision that they could make to deliver consistent quality and consistent content types. But I think the biggest hurdle is that they are going to have to figure out, just like you were saying, Boots, from a narrative perspective, from a design perspective, from an advertising perspective, how to make these releases have the ripples that any of those other major MMOs have with a full expansion drop. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is the thing with the ESO learnt this. Like this is the funny thing. You're right, because ESO is now going away from that model for a reason, because it's too predictable, because a lot of their players I get very bored by ESO's launch cadence of their roadmap. And funnily enough, they actually released it a couple of days ago and they haven't even said what Q3 and Q4 are going to be. They've just got random mentions of what it's going to be, but they haven't actually said Dungeons the story, which they have done for years, which is so weird. And I'm just like, what is happening? So it's kind of funny how Guild Wars 2 is opting for this, which is very structured. but also kind of flaky, because Guild Wars 2 can be a bit flaky with things, vague. And so it is very interesting, but I do want to ask some questions, because there's some important points I want to ask you. There's like, for instance, there's something like, I want some prediction of cost for this. So keep that in your mind. Not yet. I'm going to ask you in a bit. So just start thinking about that. Chat as well. You can start like popping that in the chat. How much do you think it's worth? If you think about where the expansion is going to launch, you pay for the expansion, but you also pay for future content. Remembering that you may not play that, but you will unlock it forever. Like, just think about that. Start thinking about the cost, and it's going to be less than the expansion. So think about the 3 different levels of expansion you have as well. So special edition, what might come with that, some thoughts. And also, just like talking to everyone else, so moving on from the ESO conversation, we can still link to that because I think it's important. But I wanted to talk about the expansion release and thinking about 2 open world maps, they say, 2 strike missions, new gameplay and combat features, and also the new mastery and new rewards, because they mention rewards specifically, and I'm like, they don't normally talk about rewards so specifically. And I know like new world rewards came out recently, so I'm thinking, how do we feel about this initial kind of content release for the kind of day one? This is the expansion, this is the start of it. Boom, here's some strikes, here's some open world maps, here's some story, here's some game, here's all the bits and bobs. How do we feel about that? Does it feel like good? Because I was like, wow, actually that's like 2 strike missions. That's more than we got. We didn't get one on the launch of EOD for a start. So if that's on launch
We got
day,
4.
I mean, we didn't get them like initially, right? Like on the launch day. Oh, didn't we? Oh, we did, didn't we?
We got 4.
Oh, we did. Yeah, that's true. Sorry, my bad. But like, is this? Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. Of course we did. But like, I guess.
yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking about
The
raids
challenge
with
modes
Guild Wars
came after.
with hard. Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking about
Yeah.
challenge modes, but I was thinking more about heart fawns. My bad. But like,
Yeah.
is this good? That's generally the question.
When I first read it, I mean, I still think it's good. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not really worried about the number of maps. In fact, I tend to enjoy less maps. I really only ever care about the quality, how much content is within a map. And I think this will also help potentially like the population of an expansion. We had 4 maps in End of Dragons, but there were also some background systems that were limiting the number of players allowed on that map. So I hope with 2 maps going into it, they structure it to where it will feel populated, because everyone is kind of centered in that expansion release in those maps. So open world stuff I'm pretty fine with. That sounds good to me. But when it comes to strike missions, 2 is better than nothing. I, for one, would have liked maybe 3, just because it would better mimic like a potential dungeon that you would get for an expansion. You typically have like 3 or 4 bosses. And I understand that these are potentially more raid quality, but you know, only 2 for paying for something, I'm okay with it, but I would have liked to have seen maybe
Even if
3.
you think about you're getting quarters, there's going to be a
quarters
strike
afterwards.
per.
It
One, so
doesn't-
technically-
It depends how many
it doesn't
quarters
say
you get.
strike. It doesn't say strike per. In fact, it says strike and then fractal,
And
and
then,
so they're
yeah.
not doing it every single one.
very
And the
true.
fractal system, I think, has a lot of issues that doesn't really grip me. Strike missions, I find, are very easy to get into, and I'm always looking for strike missions and or raids. I appreciate fractals, but you know, we'll get to that when we get to the quarterly updates.
I
But,
have that similar feeling about fractals. Yeah.
I'd say that I'm overall fine with this. I'm not disheartened. I'm not sad about it. I'm not super excited, but I'm like, yeah, that looks like I would pay for that. Yeah, like I'd be like, I'd play around a little bit, have a little fun, you know.
Fornex, gonna come to you next. Get you a little bit in this conversation. What do you feel about that?
I
Oh,
care about the quality over the quantity. I feel like, I mean, looking back at like the Icebrood saga, if it was 50% of the time, it would have been a great success. They just stretched out the content because they were going through this internal turmoil. So I think if they'd have compressed that down and not kind of put so many hurdles and achievements for people to jump through to get their rewards that should have been more easily attainable, shall we say, I think that the community would have seen it in a completely different light. It wouldn't have been such a grind fest. People wouldn't have complained so much, and they would have had overall a better reception from the community if they'd have been more condensed. So I'm not necessarily there's not much trepidation because we're only going to be getting more condensed story. I'm fine with that. But what I want to make sure is that what we do get is engaging and progressive and not filled with unnecessary grinds and sorry, I was going to say something else there. And this stoppages of play. Let's try and be PC about this.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's
So that's my thoughts. I listened to you guys talking about trying to kind of like marry up the ESO, and I feel like we need to kind of sit back and say that they're two separate games, and although they're trying to kind of have a cadence which might mirror somehow what ESO looked like in some capacity, they're kind of apples and oranges here, you know.
I think you're right in that case, and I think it's fun to compare ESO and Guild Wars 2 and see what Guild Wars 2 could be like if they're following a similar cadence to ESO. But probably the better comparison that we should try to do today is Guild Wars 2 moving forward versus Guild Wars 2 in the past.
Yeah, I agree. And that brings us nicely back to the old campaigns. The old campaigns were very much more self-condensed. The old campaigns had a very much higher cadence of release. Do we want to see that? And they also introduced different professions.
Are you bringing back up the pinned?
Yeah, I am. My
we can do that
God,
now. That's fine. That works. Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm good.
So, and also, I mean, so if you think about what we got at the very start of Guild Wars 2, and then what we're getting now and how they're doing it and how much actual content you get in a living world, because I know that I can jump in and 3 hours later that episode is done. So we're not talking about like massively dense amounts of content. So I don't know. Are they gonna? Does the story have to be like cut off at the knees for them to deliver it in this time period? I don't think that it does. I think we can have very rich, very dense story content, which is my bag, right?
I think you're right.
Yeah, but I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say. I apologize. I was just going to say. I think that where the community might feel the pinch is places that you guys care about more, which is, are we going to have elite specializations? Are we going to have all these like different tracks and different like for the achievement whores out there? How many hero points? Exactly. Well, oh God, don't. It's too soon and it hurts too much.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it might be because like you were bringing back up the old Guild Wars 1 expansions that were self-contained things that, you know, were stories. You could go back, start a new character that's a new race, new profession, and level from 1 again and do all that stuff. I don't think that's going to happen with the new setup. I don't think it's going to be able to happen that way anymore. So I don't think we'll be able to introduce Tengu as a new playable race and then play an entire from 0 to 80 again as a Tengu and do that kind of thing. That's kind of off the table in the foreseeable future now.
Unfortunately, there were never Tengu. It was always human-centric, just to like fill that dream.
I actually don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that? You think that in the new mini expansions, you think they'll be able to introduce Tengu as a playable race and have a storyline from a Tengu perspective starting at level 0?
No, who said I had to start at level 0?
No, exactly.
I think that
what kind
not
of
only
who's
will
going to do it? Who's going to do it all? I believe.
Okay.
I'm just
Go on,
saying,
Chris.
like, I do think that we will be getting these extra moments of content, and I would caution and predict that if we didn't, Guild Wars 2 would fail within like the next couple years. Because those elements, aside from story, which many of us love, and it is very high quality, there has to be that extra little sparkle to an expansion, such as elite specializations. No matter how many, maybe there's a reduction of elite specializations, but we're still getting some, or a new race, or some new type of mount, something that is super attractive and is like,
yeah, of
this is a new element of gameplay.
Have to.
Will we have multiple of those? Maybe not, because it's going to be smaller scoped. But there still has to be something.
But
And-
If I don't get an adventure with a Boots NPC, I'm just going to be sad. I'm just saying it right now.
It's never gonna happen.
That's all
Never
I'm
gonna
saying.
happen.
It is going to
But
happen. Protest.
Perhaps for an expansion, instead of doing like 3 elite specializations for that expansion, we get a new playable race such as a Tengu, a Largos, a Kodan, something that is like the big, like on the pedestal, the one thing that is super marketed, saying like, this is what you're gonna come back for, on top of all the great story and strike missions and fractals and all the meta events. But there has to be that little something that keeps players intrigued.
In a
Mini-
in
I
there,
think-
what they've delineated though, in a mini expansion that starts with 2 maps and 2 strike missions, they're going to introduce a playable race.
I mean, I don't know when it would happen in a cycle, right? But here's the thing. I think what Kroof is saying, like I was talking about earlier, there's the impact. If you
Yes.
have something that is a mass, like this is a huge thing, people have been asking for a new race in this game forever, or whatever it is, right? That's the impact that, while maybe not as instant, I mean, I think it could be actually as instantaneously big as like a full expansion drop. But if you deliver something like that, that's the impact that then brings people back in. It brings it to the attention of other games, other communities. And I think that's something that they're going to have to do, because like Kroof said, not to be doomsaying. And I don't think that Guild Wars 2 is unaware of this. I think they are very aware of this. And I think that this is something that, with them, I mean, always innovating in the space and keeping an eye on other things, that they have, I'm sure, talked about already, right? But we are literally right now in ESO seeing a huge problem where, like Jebro was saying, they're having to redefine what they're going to do moving forward, because for a long while I personally really like a lot of the systems they were introducing to the game,
I
they
agree.
weren't introducing anything that was the big impact.
And what have
right?
they done? New class this year.
Yes.
That's the big
And that
one.
that was because of the fact that so many players were like, we haven't gotten a new class in ages.
needed
We
it.
haven't gotten, and the player base started to plummet, and people were taking huge breaks and all these things because they were getting like a little fun bonus mini game, many of which I personally adore in
agree.
ESO. But again, they lacked the impact of those other kinds of things, or a new race or a new class. So it's one of those things where, I mean, could they not do it? Sure. But I think, like Kroof said, that could spell a major problem.
Red flags, red flags.
for
Totally
this
agree.
model.
I think the expansion level features that was promised in Icebrood Saga is something that they need to produce for these mini expansions. I just don't see it being a playable race. I'm gonna just put that.
Oh
aside
yeah, no.
now.
I mean,
I-
this is more of a. Go on, Onyx.
What I was gonna like, I'm gonna proffer a scenario, and I want you guys to tell me the
scenarios.
likelihood that you think that it would be. So,
Okay.
because they're basically pressing the reset button on how they're producing content. And so I'm going to take it that perhaps some of the rigidity in their decision making might have flexed during this time of, shall we say, being a little bit of a realm reborn. Okay, so do you think that it's possible, with this new cadence, with these new self-contained expansions, that we could see a paradigm shift of them introducing, in that expansion alone, a Tengu, a Lagos? Do you think that we could see them introducing, in that expansion alone, a housing system specifically for that expansion? Do you think that we can have these things, and then, in the full knowledge that, well, if you decide that you want to make a Tengu, then when you go back and play through the original story, which you're probably going to be able to do, it's going to be a bit odd for you, but you're accepting those limitations, like players who made Death Knights in the original World of Warcraft accepted the fact that they're starting in a different point and they're going to have a bit of a different experience.
like a later
You know?
game situation.
Yeah. I
Mm.
mean, I was
Revenants.
just talking in chat about revenants. Yes, I was literally having this conversation about revenants where it's like, how can you justify having a revenant before Ritlock goes in and becomes a revenant? And like how would you justify that in lore or RP? And of course, like many people were like, well, maybe you just kind of say that like the techniques have been out there, or people have been in touch with spirits or have communed with these entities, or have had some kind of contact with the mists because the mists exist, and like maybe Ritlock just refined it into a specific kind of thing, and so like there were everybody
like,
in
there's
chat
the-
was suggesting a lot of stuff.
Lone Tengu commander that's been there the whole time. That nobody like. It happens to be unique. Oh, hi.
Dog!
Momentary pause.
Oh,
Oh, dog. Okay.
Hello, buddy. That's so cute.
Burst the door open.
So cute.
Oh God, Boots. No. It's okay, Boots. It's okay. It's
So
okay.
good. But I think yes, to agree with you, Fornax, or to say that, I think they could absolutely do that. And I hope that they are scoping for it. I mean, it seems like they are already scoping these larger. I think we should be excited about this, right? Like, as we've talked about, there's a lot of trepidation and a lot of worries, of course, but I honestly do think this is going to be great. Even if I think, like many of us, I had a moment where I was like, and I'm hoping, like, I'm like, they got to scale it up. Okay, yep, and we got to have these things. We got to have impact, and we got to have this stuff. But I think they could do it, and I think this would even make it manageable for them to do something like that. To actually be able to scale out and scope, okay, great, for this expansion, we are going to do something like Tengu in lieu of other things, or we are
Yeah.
going to do this. Because then, again, like, one of the things I brought up when I was talking about this on my own stream recently was that if they are switching to something that we hope is maybe a 1-year cadence-ish, right, for the story arc or whatever it is, that also means that, like they keep emphasizing in this, the next thing isn't that far around the corner. So if you do have this expansion, you get a new race, and people are like, but I really wish we got new classes. Well, then the next expansion is not that far off that you get new elite specs, or you get whatever it is. And I don't even know how they're going to do this. They could break up the elite spec releases. They could just refine what's already in the, I don't know, but
So there's many
yeah.
options. Okay, let's talk. Can we talk about elite specs?
Give me a sec. Give me I want to do. Phoenix, did you get your question answered?
I mean, I feel like yeah. I feel like we all think that there's a possibility that if they really just decide to just go for it, hair on fire, that they're just gonna
Hey,
press the
calm down
reset
with the hair on
button.
fire now.
Sorry. Balls to the wall. No, but that if they
What is
really
the
have
obsession with like
decided-
balls
I don't
there
know,
and also hair? Like you're just trying to
I
like.
don't know.
Are we talking about
It's a
me?
failing.
Otherwise,
Hairy balls.
I think you're right. Fornax, I think you're right. They can, and I think they kind of need to, for them to be successful in mini expansions, to be able to do this, make huge bombs that they bring and put on the table, and then the table explodes, and then there's shards of table everywhere.
Okay.
But I still
Fractal
don't think-
table. Next
still-
expansion confirmed.
Because you're in
I
Ice
still
Brute
don't
Saga
think-
mode.
I still don't
Boots.
think it's
Yeah, now
Tengu.
you can sit on
I still- I
tables
still-
and
No. Well, we're not saying Tengu's the
Wash
next
your
one.
mouth out with
I think the
soap,
next
okay?
one is going to be probably player housing, because that's going to be an economic system that they could probably just
Absolutely.
make so much money from.
They can make
Yeah.
money.
But
I mean, I'll
to then fund other expansions
I'll put
and
in
then
my
the Tengu.
thoughts, because I think my thoughts are kind of in there. I like the Death Knight WoW in comparison. That's where I'm going as well. If they start a class, you can start at 60 or whatever. You learn the class and you learn whatever. They could also just have a new race that is very similar to the other models, but just has extra bits and bobs to it, like Coden or whatever. Because they're very similar. It's pretty much the head, which is different. Like, I know they're all very similar body shapes, but, there's people in places we've not been to yet.
You know what? You might be right.
No, I'm not saying that you're wrong, by the way.
No.
This is more of just
know.
like...
You being right doesn't mean I'm wrong. I think I'm talking about Kroof, by the way. I think
Oh.
it's possible.
Fine.
I would even say it's more possible to introduce a new playable race than it would have been in the prior expansions. In,
they're changing all
I
of
could
the
see
things.
that because you
Because
have the
there's less
community's
stakes.
restructuring of what they expect.
Yeah,
So
there's
you
more.
become more
There's more
open.
in. Yeah, exactly. Since they'll come more frequently, there's less stakes to be put on each individual expansion.
Yeah.
So they couldn't have put all their eggs in one basket and say, hey, this expansion is the Tango expansion. It's the only expansion you'll get for 3 years. Everybody has to re-roll the character and now be a Tengu. Now they can possibly introduce something as a less high stakes, expansion. It's only a year until you get new stuff, and everybody re-rolls a Tengu just for a year. So I still don't think it's going to happen, but I would say that it is more likely than in other expansions.
I'm just wondering how much connective tissue there will be between the expansions. Because, I mean, traditionally we've had expansion and then that connective tissue is the living world, right? And how are they going to continue to do that? Or are these going to be like separate, individual,
do it. That's what I want.
contained.
That's what I want. I want separate stories. I want more stories. I just want different ones. I'm just over it. Like, the whole dragon thing for 10 years, I was like, that's cool. I would like, I don't mind it. I don't mind it being like, I really
the next 2
enjoy.
years is still going to be dragons. I'm sorry.
Think about it, but like Elder Scrolls, I better not. Like Elder Scrolls Online does it, like, I'm comparing it again, but like they have these really cool, impactful, long, like stories which just keep you engaged, but then they visit another area and another biome, and they really take you on this journey, which is so separate, but like is connected via the NPCs you meet. They connect it in a very different way, where you don't have to necessarily have played the rest of the game to understand what's going on. And I think with Guild Wars 2, sometimes I'm like, if you don't start from the beginning, like you can lose a lot of traction quite easily. And like, that's one problem I have with it. But I don't know. Yeah, I would like to see it just done differently. I just would. I would like to see more episode, like more kind of a year's story. And that's cool. That's cool with me. But that's my own.
Speaking of a year's story. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'll advocate for the opposite of that.
Cool.
Because I like both. I think both storytelling methods can be effective. Contained regions with their own arcs and not like a huge overarching kind of goal, or like your character having some kind of bigger epic heroic role that they are filling. I think that can be wonderful, and it's very freeing and liberating. Like you were saying, Jebro, I think for players especially, just coming in, jumping into a story, shaking it up, going into something new, didn't really care for this zone or this boss, cool, well there's a new arc and new villain and new world to explore. And in those ways, I think that kind of storytelling is really fantastic. However, I am personally, this is just a personal thing, I am personally the kind of player where I do like to know who my person is in that world, and the legacy and the heroic momentum that they have as a figurehead, as a character, as the commander, as the champion. I personally feel such a deep connection to that character and that journey that I tend to, as a player, enjoy arcs that do have overarching momentum and a very strong protagonist definition, the warrior of light, the commander. Like, not to say that has to shoehorn you into being just like this one preconceived notion of this person, but I really like having a story that feels like, I'm going on a 10-year journey. Yes, as an MMO, one of the things that I can do that's unique is that I can play this game for an entire portion of my life, and the story can be ongoing in a way that other games, that's it. You put the game down, you have 40 hours, that's the story, and that's that. But I can be an evolving person. Now, of course, like, there are ways you can do this, and I think ESO does that very well, because like you might pick up little titles or things that people notice you for or recognize you for. But do I feel in ESO like I can name myself the way that I can name myself the commander or the warrior of light? No, because there's no definition in that regard specifically.
I don't see that going away in Guild Wars 2.
No. I think
I think you might trade in your commander tag for like a detective tag for a little while.
yeah.
But
I wouldn't
don't see
mind that.
going away.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like, I don't.
This is their
yeah, that's fine,
opportunity
like,
to freshen the game up, because if someone loved the dragon story, you got it for 10 years. If you didn't like the dragon story, you had to endure it for 10 years. And I think that this is their opportunity to take a break a little bit. And I wouldn't mind seeing a story continue over the course of 2 expansions, maybe 3 if it's really good and we get them very quickly. But I think that this will be something that gives a renewed element to Guild Wars 2, at least for a couple expansions.
I definitely hope that, I think this is what you were talking about earlier, that even though it's a 5 release structure of the new expansions, let's say, that happen over a year, maybe a year and a half, and the story needs to be contained in itself, because that's the theory of an expansion, that it's a contained story. But I do hope, and I think maybe we all hope in a way, that even though a story might end, there's something else going on that continues in the future expansions, and it's just not a new, it's like an episodic thing where I'm MacGyver and I'm now doing this new thing, you know. So it might be like the princess is in another castle kind of situation where the bad guy gets away and then more bad stuff happens.
I mean, I would like something. So you know how you've got like Joko's story, right? Like that was one of my favorite Living World parts. Like I would have liked that. Could have been a little bit longer for me, and I would have still loved it.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
Bit.
I'm like, you know, I would have had an expansion with a Joko, honestly.
That is the correct answer. Yes, you may continue.
I agree. No, yes, I do. Thank you for correcting me. I do feel that way because I've got a Joko emote made by someone from Arena, so like, you know, that is, I feel pretty strongly about it. So I know, you know, it wasn't like it was pretty impactful in the world, but like, you know, it wasn't like everything. It wasn't like the, you know, the end of the entire world. Like, you know, it was more regional, and it just felt like that was so impactful. It was so good. And it also just, you know, Path of Fire, I really loved that story. I loved that expansion, and it was linked in a way that there were snippets, weapons, different things which, you know, passed through, but it wasn't like, you know, everything. And I think you can do that. I think you can subtly link things which can have importance so that you can then link on, but it's not just like about one, you know, the dragons all the time and all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, I really love those stories. And there's so many side stories. They have so much talent in their studio where I'm like, they tell the, you know, the little thing we got during Extra Life. I mean, that was so good. It was so short, but like, it was just like extra stuff. And I was like, wow, would they imagine like the detective stuff? I'm really excited for this detective thing. I think it's going to be wicked. Like, it's just going to be, it's just something a little bit different, and when they can add a little bit of quirkiness, and just play around. I want them to play around with the story stuff a lot more, because I feel like they do it with the rest of their game, and I think they could really, I think sometimes they do it so much that they forget that one of the main reasons a lot of people love their game is the story, and sometimes maybe they don't touch it because they're worried about breaking that, whereas I actually think they could break it and we would be fine with that. Like, I think they could.
I'd ask Kroof a question.
No.
Yeah.
Kroof, are you still hoping for a fish out of water situation for the commander?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is that? Do you want to give some
expand upon that,
context?
please?
Are we talking about fishing achievements? Or
No, like my dream go-to like fan theory for an expansion is that they kind of retcon Zoteka, and it's actually an island on the other side of the globe that we never went to. And by some happenings, the commander ends up just like on the shore of Zoteka and is like, how the hell do I get back? And is like totally alone and isolated, and the commander kind of becomes the main character, even more so than we know now, and we kind of get to develop the commander as like a character, who they are in a completely new land. No influence of like, oh, we can have some influence, you know, we can have like pop-ins of some things, like just to get the story rolling so that we can get reconnected or whatever, but something where you're really like experiencing basically Guild Wars 3 where you're not necessarily creating a new character, but you feel like a new character.
So you mean
Like,
boots in space, basically?
Boots in
for Boots in Space, for me it's Zoteka or some like long island
Okay.
no one's ever been to in Guild Wars 2.
Yeah.
I think that would
we all
be
agree.
brilliant.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, I
I
also
think that would be
wanted
another
to.
game.
Oh, yeah. Well, no,
That'd be
I
another
think they could
game.
do it in something like this. And
Yeah.
I honestly wanted to bring up the comment in chat from Kasu because I thought this one was really good. Where Kasu mentions in the new format, so in this new style of expansion storytelling that they're doing, right? Joko's story could have been its own independent expansion cycle. And then the next one, which was coming a year later, could have been Kralkatork focused. And
Yeah,
I do
that's what
think
we're
that's something that is really great because when we're talking about something like this, even Kroof, right, where it's like maybe we have this whole other disconnected journey, or we're talking about the episodic-y kind of things where everybody was saying, I hope we can get more like condensed narratives, or I think that having this sort of shorter turnover does free you up to focus, and especially because they're not going to be trying to simultaneously develop an expansion that like everything has to somehow get you to, right? I can only imagine that as they go through things like the living seasons, right? They're going, okay, well then where are we going to end up in the expansion, and how do we format this, and what kind of entities or NPCs or villains do we need to shove in here before that, or you know, so it becomes this thing where I think you are always trying to condense whatever the little side thing is that leads up to the momentum of what the next expansion will be. And of course, like, we've had entire expansion worthy stuff. I mean, Living Season 4 is phenomenal, even with some of the, maybe we didn't get to spend as much time with Joko or things like that. It still feels like in and of itself, it delivered a lot of things that I think of on par of with an expansion, with its story and everything else.
Yeah, Season 4 was
Like,
basically the Icebrood Saga of Icebrood Sagas.
yeah, it was like
True.
what they maybe were going for to some extent, you know, like maybe a little bit less in scale, but still so good. And there was still so much stuff. But I think this new kind of format and storytelling does give us that option where, you know, you can build things in a different pace. You can do something just within that year cycle. You could try to even look at a bigger picture, but you could give these different entities or these different, you know, other kind of things their own spotlights to shine. And again, it's not like you're trying to angle everything into this huge expansion drop and cover whatever amount of ground, and then think about the fact that the other expansion after that isn't going to be out for another 2 to 3 years. And so then you have to like, oh, well then are we going to kill all the dragons now, or are we going to like, you know, I think it's one of those things where this gives them more agency to kind of focus in and tell the narrative in a way that works for them from year to year. So
I'm gonna switch us forward because we don't have a massive amount of time, and we could stick here for a long time.
We got
because
so much to talk about.
Elite Specs is something I do want to talk about. And
yeah.
I
This
wanna
will definitely
dedicate
be a
some
part
time.
2 podcast. This is
Put
a
up
lot.
the graphic
be.
I put in our chat for Elite Specs.
Do I have to show that?
No.
I can show it if you really need me
Said
to.
no,
High
Boots.
quality. It's high quality.
Save that for a video. You gotta keep some cards to your chest.
I don't make that kind of video.
I mean, I the second.
Oh, I'll have to get you on my channel.
the
Oh, sure, I'll do that.
There you go. So the following quarters, I guess I just quickly want to talk about that as well, and we can mix it into Elite Specs. The next quarter of release is going to be, which essentially actually we can mix into with the 28th of February release, right? Because from my understanding, I could be completely wrong, and maybe that's not what it is that the next release on the 28th is the One More World map, additional story chapters, challenge modes for strike missions, new fractal dungeon, challenge mode, new rewards, and additions to new systems introduced in that expansion. That is what this should be. Is that correct? Do you all think that is the case?
Yes. This is not the cycle to come. This is the cycle reborn. We are in it.
Yeah, but
Come on, marketing.
But it was a year ago that we had the launch of the expansion. It's just that we're
Season
there
1.
now.
Season 1
yeah,
caused
was
some
there.
issues. It was a bit of a roadblock, but we are in this new expansion. No more Living World.
Now, will this actually be a year later, though? Or will this be like, oh, it's been a month since Suwan is...
Probably been like a month.
Okay.
I mean,
So anyway, a year
I
later,
don't know.
End of Dragon story continues. And yeah, so we get this story content.
Yep.
And then
And the spring
it's-
roadmap.
And then it says we get a few months later, one more episode, which will conclude the storyline.
Yeah. Shall I just read it? And we'll.
Yes.
Sure.
So it says the
Sounds good.
spring roadmap. The next chapter of Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons arrives on February 28th. So soon. With familiar allies like Detective Rama and his hat at your side, you'll travel to a new location in Cantha and come face to face with a deadly foe that resides deep within the Jade Sea. That storyline will conclude a few months later with an update that introduces additional playable space to the map, adds meta events and boss encounters, and lays the groundwork for future to-be-announced adventures.
Adventures.
Unlike the Living World release, all owners
Sorry.
of Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons will gain access to this content, meaning there's no pressure to log in to unlock it, and no gem cost for missed story chapter unlocks. In the first half of the year, we'll release the Suwon Legendary Weapon Skin Variant Collection, 2 Profession balance updates, a new Fractal Dungeon and Challenge mode, and multiple updates for World vs. World. Additionally, they'll fix and finish up DirectX 11 and Chromium embedded frameworks, including a long-requested feature that will allow you to queue up for a PvP maps. Ooh, even when they're full.
Interesting.
So what this sounds to me is,
Go on.
I mean, okay.
I have
End of Dragons. Yeah,
Go on.
it's a little bit low. I mean, I want to see what comes. It might be amazing, but what it sounds to me is that, unlike our previous expansions, Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, where we got an entire Living World season afterwards that was included in the price of that expansion, in this we'll be getting 2 episodes, and between them 1 map.
Yes, with
Okay.
expansion. So very, very similar to Icebrood Saga, where you got like the first half and then like another expansion of it with more events and bosses.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
And I mean, this is the interesting thing here, right? Because I assume, maybe too hopefully, maybe too much hopium, I don't know.
Maybe.
I assume that if we're only getting 2, then after that, that's the start of a new expansion.
That's my
Expansion model.
understanding.
Yep.
That's my
Yeah.
understanding, but I don't know if that's.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that that's what's going to happen. I don't know if it's something you want to hope for or not, though,
It
because
seems like they've given us a very vague, rough framework of the next expansion. It's almost like they're soft launching it, where they're like, we can tell you about the 2, and then we can also tell you that the second one is going to be a launching point for future adventures. So
right.
Yeah,
this
is
one
true.
might be a bit shorter. They might be like, I don't know, 2 patches. I would have maybe liked 3, but maybe they are really just wanting to deliver and showcase
I think it's just
this
2.
new cycle. I also think that safe bet 2.
And I would like to
new
point out.
expansion before Christmas then. New expansion before Christmas.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe.
Probably.
I would say maybe December, January, maybe.
I think
Or maybe
February
February.
next year.
Well, I think, and
think
one thing is, it might be February next year because, to be honest, they
Jam.
lay out the first half of this year up until
Yeah.
May 2nd.
Absolutely.
And the second episode of the End of Dragons petering out doesn't show up before May 2nd. So it says a few months later after February 28th, which would be, when I hear the word few, I usually think 3,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be 3 because that would be,
I think
well,
this.
I mean, it might be May
It could be
28th. I think it
late
could be May
May.
28th.
I think this
end of May.
28th release is actually a Q2 release, and this is why they're having more space. I actually think this is a Q2 because they'll release. I think what they're going
It's
to
a
do is
Q1.
no.
It's a Q1.
I know it's
Every
Q1, but I'm talking about next year. Like, so they think about their cadence. If you release an expansion in Q1, and then you release second quarter, which is what the February 28th is, that would be Q2. Then we have Q3, Q4. So if you think about how that would, if you think about, they're talking quarters language. That's the big key
When
thing
does their
here.
quarter start? It's January 1st?
So if I'm thinking, you think maybe late Jan, you wouldn't have it early Jan because just Christmas and all that kind of stuff. But maybe
depends if
early
they're
Jan or
talking
February. It
financial
could be
quarters
February.
or-
Yeah, financial quarters, of course. That's what we're talking
Okay.
about. That's what quarters are. It's all based around that, right? So you think about Q1 can be up to March. It doesn't have to be January. It can be February. So you do Q1 and then you do Q2, whatever,
wishy-washy,
Q3. But it doesn't matter. I mean, whatever it is, it's one of those 3 months. But like, you know, this release essentially that we've got on the 28th is a Q2 release. Like, could be. You know, if you think about like if they do it yearly, this is what that release would be. So this makes sense that over the year, we won't get as much as you might get in a normal expansion year. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. This year is not going to be like their mini expansion.
I don't think so. I don't think
this year is not going to be every quarter you get a new thing. This is going to be this release.
And we're not.
One more release probably in the summer. Probably June, July is my guess. Because and then at some point after that, we're going to get the first mini expansion. But this starts to bring in the question that I think is on a lot of people's mind of getting your money's worth. And unfortunately, Guild Wars 2 has had a track record of being so freaking good for your money. So
they did just win an award for it. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So unabashedly amazing value for money content wise over 10 years. That now, starting even with what we're now getting for End of Dragons, instead of the living world that we used to get, we're now getting 2 episodes instead of 5-6 episodes. We'll have to see what these 2 episodes contain to see whether or not we think End of Dragons was worth it as compared to Path of Fire. And then
However, for End of Dragons, with this framework, this expansion was double what a mini expansion would be. Because
I'm talking about Path of Fire previous expansions versus End of Dragons.
But
it's hard.
We can't really like compare it to Path of Fire. We have to compare it to every future release.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, if we compare it to Path of Fire, like Boots, what I think you're angling at is whether or not we think that only getting 2 patch cycle editions, like, does that make End of Dragons worth less than Path of Fire since we got the seasons that followed it? Is that what you're kind of angling at?
I think I'm trying to say that, yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. I'm saying it's obviously not worth less because it's a different beast, but it is less content than we previously got for prior expansions.
But
one may also say it's
However, we
cheaper.
haven't seen.
You don't have to pay for anything.
And everyone
Yeah.
together now.
What are you talking
It's
about?
free.
That's what I'm
that's the
saying.
thing.
That's what I'm saying. As my whole point is, moving forward, we have. It's difficult to say because it's been so good in previous expansions and previous game, 10 years of it, of having so much content for so little money, that now when it's starting to be a little more realistic,
only if you are there to log in at the appropriate time.
Exactly.
There's a lot of caveats.
The big problem with this
okay.
is that technically you got
Ooh.
that extra content from Path of Fire for free. But for anybody who came in during End of Dragons and bought Path of Fire, they had to then buy the living seasons after it.
Which
So
was a
Path
shitload
of
of money.
Fire,
right. So that's, I
Path
wanted
of
to bring
Fire
up. I wanted to
can't
bring
be-
up that line. I wanted to bring up that line
Yeah.
because this line, unlike Living World releases, all owners of Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons will gain access to this content, meaning there's no pressure to log in and unlock it, and no gem cost for missed story chapter unlocks.
Right.
So yes, exactly. That means that this line is telling you that they know that you're not getting the same Living World stuff as you got in your previous expansions, but at least you don't have to log in for it. And if you hadn't bought the expansion before it released,
I view this differently.
you still
Yeah.
get it.
I view this differently, not as an apology, like, oh, sorry, you didn't get as much. Because honestly, I felt like End of Dragons, as far as the variety of maps, the story, the cinematic nature, the amount of content, the metas, everything, I felt like, to me personally, although I enjoyed Path of Fire, if we're just looking at the core expansion itself, Path of Fire expansion and End of Dragons, to me, I felt like I got way more value out of End of Dragons. But all of this to say, I felt more like this was them turning over to the new model, which is this idea, at least from what I'm getting, and maybe I'm wrong, and everybody tell me if I'm wrong. What I'm getting here from the future is that this bizarre hangnail of you get living season for free if you log in, but if you're not, like, if you didn't get it, then you have to pay for it. That's going to be gone, because if they are following like what ESO does to some degree, right? It sounds like each year you will, assuming it's a year, right? Again, this is a whole bunch of ifs, but
ifs. Yeah.
Each year you buy the expansion and then you just get everything that encompasses that season.
Exactly.
So
I think it's
all of
both.
the other releases, all of the other stuff that comes out, and then you buy the next expansion.
I think it's both. I think that line is both what I'm saying and what you're saying. I think they're acknowledging that it's not the living world that we had before.
Are you just agreeing now?
I think we all sing.
You just folded.
I think we all sing.
I mean,
I wouldn't say Ariana Grande sings
End
more.
of the
I
day,
think we all
end
sing.
of the day, aren't they kind of just in a really long-winded way, kind of just rebranding Living World, charging us for it, and just chucking a bunch of extra features in? I mean, it kind of
It's
is.
cheaper
No,
because they're
I think
reducing the
it's-
price of
I'm
expansions.
not saying it's the same at all, because they're reducing.
Which
exactly.
I don't
yeah.
even think they need to reduce the price of
I don't
expansions.
think they do either. That's the thing.
I don't think they do
Like,
either.
it could have been 35
Look,
quid, bucks,
I think
whatever.
it should
40
maybe be,
bucks,
if they're going to
whatever it
reduce
was.
it, I hope it's like 25.
But
Because like, I still want them to have the commitment to a price point where they're like, it almost like shows to the player base.
Right, because if
like,
it's
the
only
quality.
20, if it's
like,
only 20,
are we going to
it's-
expect
that
a
is-
lot?
If it's only 20, when you think about it, that's a mount skin. So
Yeah.
so I don't think they could price it as low as 20,
can
unfortunately.
you? Is this though? Think about the investment of that though. Think about what they've not had in previous years. If they know each year they're getting 20 to 25 bucks a year, every year for a certain amount of people, they can project a lot easier, and as well as, like, you know, think about investment and what they're putting into different areas in their company, right? And they can also give, you know, NCSoft those numbers. But the thing is that also that is pulling people into the gem store, which is where they make their real money. That's where they make the money over the year, which is their sustained amount, which is where we see them
Sustain.
Like, that's the important thing. That's the money that they know they're getting every month where they can pay people. So that pulls you back into there, and then they can feed those sign maybe some of the quality of life things, you know, all the other bits and bobs into the gem store as well, and we'll pay them for it. Because we said that we will. You know, we don't need to debate that. That's something we would gladly. Someone said in chat, you know, they're allergic to money. I think sometimes, you know, we forget that, like, we do get so much, and I think we're paying for more. I think we're gonna. It's only we want to give them money. You know, we feel like they deserve it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think
yeah,
to address
I know.
a couple things, as Obi says in the chat as well, my fear is that this is them splitting up expansions into smaller parts and dropping Living World, so overall there will be less content. And Jeb, I think what you said, this idea of, okay, so they're just rebranding Living Seasons and charging us for all of them. I think both of those things are legitimate fears within the community and things that will be voiced and spoken about. Now, all we can obviously do is look at what they've said here. And I think with the new leadership with the team, I think with End of Dragons being an amazing, like, hey, this really was something that was fantastic. It was released well. There were a lot of goods with it, right? I think with a lot of the things that we've seen, we can perhaps continue to ease off a little bit of maybe the trepidations of the past. And with this in particular, I mean, I agree, at least from what they've outlined for us in this, and as they've talked about here, and we'll have to see how it goes. This does, to me, sound like it will be more consistent year-round content. Because when we think previously about, sure, we got a lot with expansions, but again, think about how much time was between those. Think about the drastic amount of quality between prologue episode and the end of Iceberg Saga. Think about the length and pacing of those episodes. Think about the unpredictability of any content release that we had in the year. Theoretically, right, with strike missions, with these other new game modes, with this new style, I think that year-round we should be seeing more reliable, more predictable, beefier, stronger content from this game. And I also think that yeah, right? And I also think that what Jeb came around to is, as you were like working through that and talking about that, this idea that this is also a guaranteed yearly income. And especially if they offer something like tiers of expansion, which I hope they do, where we get the collector's edition and the blank and we get additional things.
They brought in the model last year
Like
as well.
25,
Again. That's another
50,
income.
100.
It's another income revenue.
I'm less concerned
Well,
about that,
yeah.
but continue.
Well,
I want
I only say that
dwarf.
I only say that I
Goddamn.
hope that they do that because like we've been saying, ArenaNet sometimes seems allergic to trying to make money. And the thing is that I would rather them be like, hey, you can pay $60 for an expansion to get this unique mount skin and like whatever other stuff. Or if you don't have that money, you can pay less. And then you're also going to get the content. But I know that I personally am always like, hey, please let me pay you some more for this game. And like when we think about
It's once a year. It's like
know.
12 months. Like just divvy it up. It's like $5 a month. I know
With no
that it's
sub,
expensive
they
for
might-
people as well, but
you
it's a
know-
video game. Like, you know, it's,
These things cost they take
cost
a lot
money.
of funds and cost a lot of money to create, but they also might explore other avenue routes or routes of revenue in the future. You know,
maybe they'll have a subscription.
No.
Well, I mean,
maybe not sad, but
I think, like you said, though, if they have a collector's edition and you pay 50, and then you look at how that balances out, that might be roughly the equivalent of sure. Well, those are sub money we would have gotten each month, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. So
$10 cheaper than like a standard AAA game.
I think that this is good for them monetarily. Just
Sure.
to wrap up the thought, I think it's good for them monetarily, and not in a way that to me feels predatory. In a way, it feels to me like it just makes so much more sense because they've never wanted to implement a straight up subscription because that is something that, a lot of players may even find alienating or drive them away from the game. But they have also had some problems with how they want to structure release, all this kind of stuff. But then on top of that, right, think about if they have these gaps in releases, right? So we get an expansion, maybe you pay $50 for it or whatever. And then all of your current player base theoretically logs in to get the episodes. You're just not earning money from that for 2 to 4 years. And then new players are paying, but you don't have any guaranteed revenue spikes within those periods. So what then are you relying on? The gem store. So then we see the active gem store. And I have no problem
And then we
for
get
the
pissed
vast
off with
majority of
skins paying
considerations.
so much money and they're better than the game. Yeah.
But to me, it feels like if this gives them a more reliable yearly income where they actually get a bit of consistent investment, everybody pays this, everybody gets the stuff. We don't have people coming late to it who are confused about why they now have to pay for it. We don't have people even who maybe just got busy and missed a login window and then didn't get it and had to pay for it. We don't have any of that. You pay for it, you get all the expansion. You pay for it, you get the
And
expansion.
human beings like they do like routine. We are just built that way to a degree where routine is a thing. Like even the most adventurous person in the world has a routine in some way, shape, or form. It's healthy and it is going to be a good pathway. I really want to push your point and then we're going to push on very quickly.
I do need to
Griff.
go.
All right, Griff is going to go.
I'm going to step out, but thank you all so very much.
Are you all good for sticking around? I'm going to change the things. Kroof, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate you.
Do you need me to stick around before you change something up with the window or something?
I have to do it when you go, so.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay.
Thank you for coming. Make sure you follow Kroof.
Yay,
Kroof
bye,
is
Kroof.
doing all the things on
Have a lovely
YouTube.
weekend.
Follow Kroof
Thank
at
you so
Kroof.
much. I will be sure to catch you all later. I'll catch you all in the chat. All right, bye everyone.
Bye.
Okay, I'm just going to do some adjusting. Boots, go on. You were going to say something.
Right. I am lost now again.
Sorry.
I think I was trying to say that number one, I agree. I never liked the having to log in to unlock the storylines of Living World, and when Steam came out, having the full bundle for $100 rather than blah 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 blah. Yes, that's a great way to make money, but I think I even said it before the Steam release. I thought that it would have been a better idea to just bundle it with the with the Living World, like have them free. If you have those expansions, you have that Living World afterwards. And I'm very happy that it's changing to that system now. Is what I assume is that happening. Number two is that from their post, they outlined the problem, they outlined what they want for the future, and then they told us what their solution is. their solution is the cure for the problems that they stated. And I think that in theory, it should be the way to go, and it should be the right thing to do. The one hangback is that in the previous 10 years, we've been spoiled. We've been spoiled as players of this game, and we've gotten so much for what we've paid into it. So going to something more realistic for the game will make a few players unhappy, because they're probably going to be getting less than what they've previously gotten for what they paid overall. But we will be getting...
You don't know technically, because you don't know how much it's going to be.
Technically, we don't know. Technically, we don't know. It's very possible that it will be the perfect price point, and it'll be exactly what we all wanted.
Yeah.
Might not be, though. But what it does do is it solves the problems that they had and that they outlined at the beginning of the blog post. And that's important. That's important for the game going forward, to have a cadence that's proper for the game, and we know what we're getting going forward, rather than just having like long blanks of silence and no releases that we don't know what's going on.
Yeah. This is also so tangential, but I wanted to mention it because I agree with literally everything that you just said, Boots. And I think you hit the nail on the head. This is, I think, a really valid solution for many of the problems that they outlined. And I am looking forward to seeing them rise to the challenge on this, right? And thinking about even just something in this that is a small little note, but that already just makes me feel even more positive. Again, proving yet again that they are listening, that they are doubling down on this. We are listening to our players thing. This little detail that was in this last section where they talked about everything that's coming out, but then they also mentioned that there's going to be a long requested feature that will allow you to queue up for PvE maps when they're full.
Oh, yeah.
This was like, I'm so happy. Yeah. I'm so happy because my gosh, I have any time
having to right click and go try to get into, oh my God, it's so annoying.
It's so annoying. And in maps for things like, the Dragon's End meta and stuff, like, it's just sitting there clicking it. You're having people in the chat like, I'm still trying to get in, but I just can't get it. And like, it's just
most people just don't even know how to as well. Like, they're just general player. They just don't know.
Yeah, but this is so nice.
And you got to do the IP system and...
Yeah. I honestly think that, we have seen the studio with its new leadership and with everything else really striving to do what I think will be best for the game's longevity, for the players to meet long unmet expectations, to push forward into new expectations, and to deliver things that maybe we haven't even known to ask for, because we've just been like, please do these other things, please, we beg you. So I feel good. I feel good about this. I do think there is so much potential with it, and even if there are some worries, even if we I think have a lot of valid discussion, I think, like you said, Boots, ultimately, this is a solution to this problem. And how they realize it will be the big deciding factor, and just like how successful it is. But I really do feel like this team cares so much about the game, and the current studio direction feels so aligned in the mission of, let's really do this. Like, let's really elevate Guild Wars 2 and push it forward. That I think this is going to be great, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. And I think we all just have to be like, okay, and just buy into it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see how it goes.
We have to give people a chance. We have to give it a chance, and I think there's going to be the people who have their, negative spin on it. And I think, we enter into things with trepidation, and, we just be careful, and that's okay. You can do that. Just, let people enjoy the things. One thing I will say is, as we talk about Wanderings, is that they don't mention elite specs. I think we should have this. Yeah. I wanted to put this conversation in this podcast. I know we're going to be talking about this for weeks to come.
Are you going to put up my graphic card? Oh yeah, I
give
made
me
it
a
in
sec.
20 minutes.
I'm not sure what it
using
is.
Microsoft Excel.
But so basically, we don't know, and we haven't read the rest of it. We don't know what the deal is with Elite Specialization because of expansions, and the cadence is Elite Specializations come in with an expansion. That's how they sell it. So there are different things you could think about. Reduced cost, maybe that's because of Elite Specializations. Maybe it's because of reduced content. Maybe it's because of different things. But
it's unrealistic
possibility-
that they include 9 elite specializations
very
every year.
unrealistic.
That's unrealistic.
But
is it realistic to put
what's the
2
idea?
elite specializations or 3?
Yeah.
Maybe more realistic, but then that comes into the question of there are a lot of players who only play one class. Will they be upset if there's only Mesmer, all the light armors, and their heavy armor character doesn't get something for 2 years? Possibly. So that is also possibly unrealistic just by player-based reaction, you know? So how are they going to do elite specializations in this new format? It's a very good question. Another question is, do we need new elite specializations? And that's what this graphic represents.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah. So
do you want to explain your graphic? Because you spent 20 minutes
so
on it. Actually, wait. 100 episodes of the Lightbringers podcast. Okay, Boots has been on at least half of them, and Boots has produced something for the stream. So the only other time Boots has produced something was when we were doing elite specialization things, and he drew that thing. I don't know if you remember that.
Notes. Hey, I once wrote down notes for a show. I don't forget which one, but I wrote down notes.
You didn't show me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just impressed. Like, I think you've actually done the most.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to say how proud I am.
Where's the key?
Where's the what?
Oh, there's no
where's the
key. Oh,
I should have done a key. You're right. There's no key.
How do I know if it's the church or a steeple?
It's intrinsic. You know, it's like self-explanatory. I like to think the key here. So
wait, is this Excel or Google Sheets?
This is Excel.
Okay.
Excel. 2007. Excel 2007.
2007.
So here we have the 9 elite specializations across the top.
It's an older one, but it's a good one.
Sorry, the nine professions across the top, and then we have the required, like, if you want to say we need elite specializations to be able to flesh out each profession to give them the ability to run every role, and that's very theoretical. It's very likely that that's not at all what we want the game to be in the future necessarily anyway. But some already can do that. So you have power DPS, counter DPS. Pure healer is kind of something you might want, but then you got Alac heal, quick heal, Alac DPS, quick DPS. Those are like the roles for PvE. We're not talking about PvP in War vs. World right now because technically you could kind of do anything in those game modes. Anything kind of goes with. Any of the professions can fill one of those roles eventually. Maybe not like each role. Anyway, let's talk about that later. But I'm talking about PvE right now. Elementalist could kind of fill all those roles. It's not very good at quick heal. It's kind of good at Alac heal, but it could kind of fill all those roles.
But you have to go in 20 minutes. I'm just saying.
That's a good point. Anyway, the red ones, so clearly Warrior and Ranger can't do those things.
Yeah.
But except for Warrior and Ranger, you could just do little fixes in the current elite specializations and the current classes.
They've got balance patches in that.
You could do balance patches. You could make little changes that would give the roles to the ones that are missing it currently without adding new elite specializations. Warrior and Ranger are a unique case because their current quickness and current alacrity come in their core specializations. And it makes it so that they won't be allowed to be given, even if they get new elite specializations, they won't be allowed to be given the other boon, quickness or alacrity, because by design, ArenaNet doesn't want to allow people to give both quickness and alacrity at the same time to a group.
They were trying to not do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So since Warrior could do it from a core spec, if they get a new elite spec that gives them alacrity and they just equip that elite spec and that core spec, they would be able to give both. So that choice won't exist. You'll have to do both, and that's not good. So they can't do that. In other words, you don't technically, to fill all the roles anymore in PvE, need new elite specializations. But can the game continue without ever having new elite specializations, considering it's been such a selling point for so many people? I don't know.
I have an idea, and I'm not sure if it would go down well with people, but I feel like it could be something that they could potentially do in the future. And it could be interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about this idea, but it could be a money thing, and people might get upset, but you don't have to buy the things you don't want. They sell elite specializations in the gem store when they're ready to release them at a very low price. So that if you think about how much it would have been for elite specializations, maybe even an included expansion, that they kind of just get released in over time. So you have something and you're like, oh, I can test this elite specialization, and it comes out. Or it just comes out with a quarter release. You get 2 elite specializations and they don't just all come out at the same time. Like you could, if they're thinking about dividing things up, that's what they're doing, right? They're dividing and conquering over a year. Do it with the elite specs.
Yeah. A new elite specialization, it feels to me like they would come out as flavor rather than filling roles.
I think
anymore.
so. I think they could.
would...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or just get new weapons. Bring in new weapons. Like change that.
Yeah. I think they could sell the elite specs, but I will say that, I mean, you obviously said initially that it wasn't even something you necessarily wanted them to do. And I hate the idea. I hate it, Jebro. I hate the idea that you had. So I really hope that they, not that I don't think you would get your money's worth out of buying elite specializations, but again, if we're talking about impact with these kinds of seasons and the fact that you are now, no matter what, buying the whole expansion, including whatever would be the ongoing content, to me, you got to put that in it. Like you have to have some equivalent.
There enough other stuff, right, for them to put in. Is what I think you're saying. Yeah, they haven't got like a whole new. Unless they gave us something like housing or something, or like a whole new system that was just so epic. Like, absolutely. I think you're right.
But I think they have to put them in. And I mean, I don't personally mind if they stagger them. I don't mind. I know other people probably feel differently, but to me, I know that when all of the new elite specs drop all at once, I'm excited because I'm like, oh, show me what every class has, right? But oftentimes then my intentions to make a character of whatever or do this or do that falls to the wayside, and we are a year out of the release and I've only tried 2 of the new elite specs. So like, to me, I feel as though breaking them up throughout the year would actually give me more time to even digest what had been added, for them to troubleshoot it, balance it, look at how it fits with everything. And then to have that moment where like, oh, I'm excited. What were the new things that were added? Oh, maybe I'll try that Ranger now, or maybe I'll try that. I mean, I already play Ranger, but you know what I mean? I think it would encourage players to kind of get interested in things, even, or like make a new character even if they hadn't. So I'm sure some people would be upset.
Specs, though I would I mean, it's part of my bread and butter. I love elite specs. I would be upset if they never came. There was never any new ones, but it doesn't have to be elite specs to shake up combat. You know, it could be huge balance patches. There was a tweet I saw, I think it was from Brazil, that said another good idea would be, well, not a good idea, but it could be a good idea. It might throw off the balance of the game completely, but it'd be interesting to see, is if you allow each class to drop one, instead of an elite specialization, take one spec line from any other class and allow them to use one of the weapons from them.
Well, that's what I said yes to that. I would his tweet. I know the tweet you're talking about. I was like, yeah, absolutely. I would actually like to see us be able to use, I would love to, I would honestly love to, whether or not it was core, I would actually, And not that this would ever happen because of what you said earlier, but like just being able to pick whatever the hell like elite specs we have and like mix and match it into some weird amalgamation of like Scrapper and Holosmith together.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, you'll destroy the balance of the game.
absolutely. It would be brilliant. I would love to do that. I'd love to have areas like that where you could, anyway, just a random fun.
Yeah, and like another idea is like in an expansion, give a spec that's available to all players, but to all things, like one generic spec that everybody's allowed to use. Like I think we talked about it before, going capping skills and stuff like that is a possibility as well. Yeah, you could update and make combat different and interesting without having to add new elite specs, but elite specs is like the most direct way to do it.
I think they've told us how they're going to do it, and I think Jebro had it right on the nose.
What is
Because
it?
if there were going to be elite specs in these expansions, it would have been the first fucking thing that they put.
Absolutely,
Okay?
would have. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said I was right. Wait, people don't say that often on this podcast. There's been almost 100 episodes, and that doesn't happen often. Normally,
You were
I'm like
correct,
disagreed
sir.
with. Go on
You were
then.
correct.
What am I correct about?
I think that they're going to be giving the weapons. I think they're going to be chopping and changing. Maybe they'll even do several different weapon set skills for each weapon. There's no reason, or a new weapon, or bring in the spears that people have been asking for.
Yeah,
since,
that would be sick. Or whips, Rook. Rook likes the whips in the game. That's what they said.
But no, I don't think we're getting elite specializations, or they're going to be like a tentpole expansion feature.
Oh, okay.
Oh, if
That's
they
really a
added
way to
elite
go with that.
specializations, it would definitely be a tempo expansion feature,
Yeah.
though.
I mean, so
Yeah.
do elite specializations have to be for a singular class? Could you have say that in this expansion we're going to bring in, I'm going to make up something now, like the Paragon from Guild Wars 1. But if you're an elementalist, you have a different set of skills for the Paragon than you would if you were a warrior for the Paragon. If you're a
Isn't that
ranger
just
for the
different
Paragon.
elite specializations then?
Well,
They all
kind of. But no, but it's thematic, and that way that they
They've
could
still
they
got
could
it.
Oh,
could
they
They
pull
wouldn't have
down
to
the pool.
redesign.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that it's the same thing but different thing, and it's a tent pole.
That's kind of a mix between elite specs and what I said earlier of just having one new spec that everybody could use.
Do we do
Exactly.
an elite spec? Maybe we do an intro elite spec stream next week and talk about this more. Maybe.
Okay,
I'm gonna try and think on, because I think this could be a really long conversation. And we've got 10 minutes, and I did want to just go on to the just the roadmap very quickly before we do leave. Give me 2 seconds to make sure this is working. Okay, so we have the roadmap. We kind of went through it a little bit, but bring this back. And really, really good conversation. I'm loving this. Oh, it's so good to have news, isn't it? It's so good to have news about the game we're playing. Oh, it's so good. Okay, so February 14th, we just had the New Balance patch. If you've not played Hammer Guardian, it is so fun in PvP right now because you can teleport on the second ability. It's
That looks fun, yeah.
Banish, then boom. It's really good. And also...
How do you like the new... Oh, wait, you haven't
Reapers.
played Firebrand, huh?
No, I haven't played new Firebrand changes. I played Reaper
Reapers.
changes. They're really good.
Yeah,
Shouts are
Reaper's
good.
pretty good right now.
Shouts are
Those,
good.
yeah, I'm still getting used to the mantras.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that next week as well.
We should.
February 28th, we've got the map and story content. That is in a week on Tuesday, so expect a lot of stuff for that. It does say map and story content, so even though we say we expect it to be level with the second quarter kind of patch from like an expansion, I don't know if we're going to get everything because I haven't actually said that it's all in there, so I'm a little bit confused about that. Super Adventure Festival, standard. And then May 2nd is a Profession Balance update, and we're not getting much from February till maybe June, July, right? Which is going to be interesting. So there's a lot to think about. And we said it's not going to, they're getting used to it. They're still trying to think about, maybe they're going to get in the flow of it and they'll release it later in Q3. We'll see, because technically we'll be in Q2 anyway.
Is Sue-Won Legendary Variant going to be like what we thought it was going to be?
What's
Where
that?
in daytime it's going to be water and at nighttime it's going to be the void.
Oh, maybe.
Oh, that would be cool.
Well, like
We'll have to see.
equinoxy kind of. That could be cool. I know equinox is together, isn't it?
I'll just put this up for you.
What's that?
Oh my gosh.
Oh wow, the unicorns! Yay! Is that like a My Little Pony? That looks like My Little Pony. But yeah, I mean, they're saying they're working on things in the background. We're so excited about the next phase of Guild Wars 2, both things we are able to share today and what's just over the horizon. The changes we've outlined will allow us to provide a better experience to our fans, release new content updates more consistently, and ensure that Guild Wars 2 will be around for many, many years to come. Listen to those words. Guild Wars 2 will be around for many, many years to come. So I'm remembering that phrase because I was like, oh. I was thinking, like, when are we going to get will we get an expansion one day?
We're going to get many expansions every year.
I mean, not expansion, sorry. Guild Wars 3.
Oh, okay.
I've just been thinking about it recently, that's all. A little bit more.
Are they employing a lot of people on an undisclosed project right now? I'm just like,
Maybe.
They have been. We saw some stuff.
No,
didn't
I'm
we?
gonna shut this down. No, it's not Guild Wars 3.
It's not Guild Wars 3, no.
They
They're
wouldn't
skipping
say.
3. They're going straight to 6.
I know. I don't know why this
think it's a
is. I
different
don't know
game.
why this is. I feel this is a me problem. This is not an anyone else problem. I feel a deep annoyance at anybody that's like, Guild Wars 3. When is Guild Wars 3 coming out? I'm just like, we're
Why
not
are
done
they
with
suddenly
this one yet.
this old lady that's like
I don't
trapping
know. It
people in
sounds
their
like a
oven?
little harpy in my head, and not like a hot harpy. Just like like
As
a
opposed to,
rude one.
harpies are generally very good looking.
Yeah, they're generally very attractive. I
Calm
don't know.
down.
It's very silly. I know
this is
that like
a family-friendly podcast.
I know that there are many reasons
Very
why people might
confirmed.
hope for something. Why people might hope for something like a Guild Wars 3. And that's not to mean that I think anybody who would hope for that is annoying. It's just I hear it so
You heard
much
it
where
first.
everybody is just like, I'm so done with Guild Wars 2. I hope we get just Guild Wars 3 soon. But to me, this game, I mean, again, it has so much life still in it. And I think it's really starting to hit its stride. So I don't know what this other project is, that might be being hired for, but I am not even, I'm going to shut the conversation down because honestly, I think they have redefined so many things for Guild Wars 2, and we do have a really great future ahead of us, and I'm really excited for that,
Can you do your best harpy voice and say, "Flock to me"?
To me! Ah! How was that?
Very good. Wow.
good, yeah.
Bates, good job. Okay, I'm gonna. Does anyone else want to round up? I think I just want to round up basically by saying it was good to have this news. It was good to get the blog post. I will add something that I am a little bit disappointed in because I feel like this is something that I really do need to say nearly every single time this happens. Please give us a bloody live stream of these things and talk about them when you release it. Release the blog post.
I don't know. I don't
come
know
out
if it
with
needs
a
to be
thing.
a live stream. I don't even know
Oh
if
yeah,
it
it
needs to be a
does.
live
They
stream.
need some video. They need to hype it
but
up.
Something
this
this
is a
important.
big thing, though. Boots.
They were very,
It's
very
huge.
precise in their language here. If you do a live stream, there's
What?
always a chance of saying something you're not supposed to say.
That's not
Well,
a
can I
good
just
reason
say
to
that-
not
that's
do
an
a live
outside. What
stream.
are you talking about?
For
That's why you have
anyone to do.
PR and marketing
I mean, yeah.
teams. They train
For
you.
These
any
are
of
very
us-
good looking.
For any of us that do anything in front of cameras, which we all do, but also professionally with hosting or anything like that, I mean, just knowing when to keep your mouth shut is part of the skill set.
That is your job.
You literally just have to
I
address
did
it. And
that
I will
in Guild
say,
Wars. I was literally trained to do that at this
Yeah.
studio, like when I
Like,
was commentating. I was
it's one
literally
of those
trained.
things where for
not
me, I agree with you, Jebro. I really wish they had done an actual video announcement about this because again,
For sure.
impact. impact.
it's
We
that's
need
it.
them to sell
Video
the player
announcement.
base on this. It could be a video, it could be a YouTube, it could be anything. It could
Even
be
if
whatever,
it's just
right?
like a teaser.
I just don't think it needed to
Like,
be a live stream.
no,
I think a video, yes.
No,
Video
live
announcement,
stream.
yes.
Something needed to go out, and they needed to be like, this is the future of Guild Wars 2, and we needed to
absolutely.
see some kind of, I don't know, even exciting trailer of something, or just anything that would make us feel beyond having to go to a blog post to read this, would make us feel like we were getting swept up in it and we were excited for it, right? It's about how you frame it, it's about how you deliver it, and it's about
really is.
selling it to people, getting people on board for this new change, this new direction. Because I guarantee you that when they switch to this and people start hearing about a new expansion, we're gonna get so many people that are gonna be like, I don't understand, but it's not all of it, but like...
Yeah, I
what?
wonder how much of the player base do you think actually reads blog posts?
Not that much.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, there'll be a lot of people who do nowadays because because they know with Guild Wars 2 that's how you get your news, which isn't great. And it's on the launcher, right? So
it is.
that's
It's
the
true,
only
that's true.
that is the saving grace because not a lot of people go to the website. They access the launcher, so the launcher's there.
You just saying it's on the launcher reminded me that it's on the launcher. I never look at anything on the launcher.
So
I just press
maybe that's bollocks then.
log in and play.
That's actually not good.
It's okay, guys, because I've got you covered. You just go to my you go to YouTube,
Yeah,
and I've got
alright.
a massive place with this changes everything with Rama like
true.
staring out of you. That's what they needed to do. I've done it for them. It's fine. We've got it covered.
There you go.
We're okay.
Yeah.
And then
But I
there's
mean,
that other one that I saw that's a picture of what's his name? And
Kanaksai.
Kanaksai. Is he coming? Exclamation point, question mark.
I am learning the fine art of clickbait. So
Yeah,
there you go.
pretty good,
Thank
pretty
you.
good.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they need to do this, and like this should have been a huge announcement that literally like the video is in the launcher and it's there and it's like the future of Guild Wars 2. Like,
Yeah.
They could have done
And
this.
then-
They could have done this like their previous expansion release announcements. They could have done a full-on announcement thing about this. I know they haven't got the content specifically, but they could have waited a little bit and given us something. That's all I'm saying.
Would they have waited? Would you have been happy if they waited longer before giving any kind of announcement?
Yeah, because they could just release a blog post on this. It would have just But the thing is like expand on it. Don't just give because we know that it's not coming. I mean, that's the problem because they haven't released anything else. It's
Dear
just like, I
devs,
don't
if
know.
you give me 24 hours of the blog post before, I will make an awesome video hyping this up for you.
They've had this problem for a long time. They did it. The best marking they had was Heart of Wands. That was it. That was the best
they
marking.
did some great stuff, although, we obviously had a lot of conversations, but they did some great stuff leading up to End of Dragons, and they were so active with their live stream scheduling and planning and
Yeah, that
things
was
like
pretty good.
that. And the trailers that they released were great. I mean, I think just anything would have been fantastic, even if it was just a title logo splash screen or some sort of cool pan of concept art or teaser
the
for
old
whatever
stuff
the
they
next
used to do.
expansion is
They-
going to be, or
yeah.
like just something. And they could have outlined this, like what you can expect from these, and just something again to frame it. And I hope that they will do this as we get closer to the actual release of the
Yes.
first expansion, and that we will
Please.
get that impact, and that they will be really selling us, and that we'll get those moments where they even break down, like, I know you got a lot of questions. Great. Well, let's talk about exactly what this expansion is gonna, deliver to you this go around. And keep in mind that in the future we might get even more, or just something, right? Because I think that'll help.
Well, because you
Also
said it
shift
earlier
everybody.
today. You said it earlier that these expansions, just like ESO expansions, can get lost in the shuffle because they're mini expansion, and unless they are presented in a way to make them feel like expansions, they might just end up being like Living World episodes. They might not get the same traction as they did as an expansion is supposed to, as what Anyway,
They have to toot their own horn, ring their own bell. They've got to, be more exhibitionist in their protestations and evangelize for the game properly. That's what they've got to do.
I hope they do an event at PAX West this year. I hope they do something like the Icebird Saga, but like they did for that event at PAX, but like for the actual
That
new
would be for the next
type
expansion,
thing.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus we could all hang out. Yay! That would be cool.
Yeah.
That would be good. Yeah, and have I hope so. I mean, I really do.
And another good thing about these expansion things is that very likely that at least one of them is going to be Guild Wars 2 in space.
Your wife is peeking in behind
Your
you,
wife is
boobs.
beginning.
Oh, is it time?
We're going. We promise. We're doing an outro. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I'm sorry. Say Jebro sorry. Jebro sorry. It's my fault.
She's like, right now, Boots, right now.
Tell her I think she's amazing and she is the best cook in your
I will.
household.
I'm a pretty good cook.
I know that's why you'd be upset, but I believe that she is.
It's possible.
Anyway, everyone, thanks so much for watching the podcast. We are going to bugger off. Thank you very much indeed to my guests. There is Kroof, who was here and who was also not here now. Please go and follow all their stuff. There will be a description below where you can follow all their things in the YouTube bot. Otherwise, Boots, tell us what you do it quick before you go and have an amazing spaghetti off the wall.
I am
Meal.
Boots. You could find me at World of Enders on YouTube, and I make videos sometimes, and I take care of my barking dog other times.
Rookery, what you do it.
On Twitch at Rookery, that's ROOKURI. On YouTube at the same, and on Twitter at Rookery_.
Excellente. Fornex, aka the Grand Herald, giving us news and having a fun little pop-up character on your desk this week, and a faucet, I think.
A faucet. A what it? I hope there isn't a faucet. What
Looks
are you looking
like
at?
it. Oh no, is it a bell? I don't know.
There's a mouse and keyboard.
Oh, sorry, it was the background image. It was like going over the top of it. It looked like it was
Oh.
a tap going into a mini sink. Sorry.
This is some awesome Jade Sea art that you can find on ArtStation. If you want to have a look at that, that's amazing. Just type in Guild Wars 2 Jade Sea and you'll see some amazing artwork from the game, from official sources as well. I'm Funax. I make Guild Wars 2 content on YouTube. There are 2 videos that I've made this week. One talking about the topic that we just discussed here, this studio update, and what we didn't talk about here today, which was a lot of story speculation about who the next big bad in the game will be. Please check out my video on that. There's I've got about 3 different possibilities and a lot of old school Jade Sea lore that you can find out about. If you didn't play the first game, I highly recommend it. It's quite good fun. And
Good
that's
stuff.
me.
Yes, and also Grand Herald did do loads of prep and sent me a load of images today as well. So they did as well. So
I get brownie points.
They do get brownie points. They are. Oof. Was it? It wasn't
Boots,
a
you get so
spreadsheet.
many brownie points. You know what? I'm going to give you so many brownie points. And you know what? I think you're an amazing cook. I think you're probably better than anybody I know, and I would eat your food.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And balance out Jebro's sass of you.
Yeah.
No, he didn't make a key, so he has to have at least 1 demotion point.
Rook
No
is
key,
sucking
no
up
demotion
now.
point.
This is not fair. Okay.
-1 brownie point. All right, go
Minus
ahead.
17. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Please check out my stuff, Jebro, twitch.tv/JebroUni, as well as on my YouTube channel. And when I'm making stuff when I can, I'm doing a therapist and doing all the things. So if you do want to support the channel, support anything else as well, you help production of this and keeping it going, doing all the things. Do appreciate you very much. Thank you very much. Check out anchor.fm/JebroUnity as well. If you're on Spotify, Google, iTunes, all the things, make sure you chuck a little review. Give us 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, whatever you want. I'd muchly appreciate it. Get it out there. And chuck a like and comment on this video as well, because people tend to watch the outros because they're normally quite funny. But this week we don't have time because Boots' dog is ravaging his leg. So we will see you next time. On the
Again,
Lightbringers
just
podcast.
confirming the furry. Just confirming the furry.
God,
Jesus.
don't you bring that good sweet dog into this. Not that you
Yeah.
can't be a good sweet dog and be a furry. You can absolutely.
Oh no, I was just saying, I was saying ravaging. I mean, like, you know, because it's hungry. Bye.